Hello, everybody, and welcome to Comics with Friends, the bi-weekly podcast where two best buds get together, read a comic, talk about what they loved about the comic, what they didn't like about it, and maybe tell a few jokes along the way. Today, for this very special episode, in my eyes, we are going over Superman's Secret Origin, written by Jeff Johns and drawn by Gary Frank. I am Ethan, your host, and I am joined by my co-host, Mason.
Hey.
What's up, man?
I'm interested to talk about this one.
Okay. That's very good.
I believe it has been mentioned several times. I'm not necessarily a Superman fan. Mm-hmm. While this book definitely made me see him in a new light, mm-hmm. It has not converted me to the Superman side of things.
Okay.
There are some things I wasn't a fan of in this book, but there was a lot of good things in it too. You know, like I didn't completely hate it. I enjoyed reading it. It wasn't a waste of time or anything, but it just kind of confirmed like, okay, maybe Superman is just not a hero for me.
Your cup of tea.
Yeah, like I can see why people like him.
No.
Like 100%.
Yeah.
It just doesn't speak to me.
Right. That's understandable. I'm sure it goes to no surprise that Superman is my second favorite superhero of all time.
This entire time I'm reading it and I get done and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to break this news to Ethan. Like,
I don't care. I mean, I don't think everyone should have to like Superman.
Right.
Even though I adore the character, I adore what he stands for. What I have a problem with is people who say Superman is boring because he's just too powerful when they've never picked up a Superman comic in their life.
I've never thought Superman was boring because he was too powerful. Mm-hmm. I've always just thought his character with the way his persona is, and maybe it's kind of hypocritical now that I'm sitting here talking and thinking about it, but it's like I feel like there's only a certain amount of things you can do with it. But like I said, I feel maybe now, as I'm saying this, a little hypocritical because I guess you could say the same thing almost about any hero.
You could.
I can't.
So sometimes a character just doesn't speak to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's perfectly fine. I mean, my favorite superhero is Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. Spoilers alert. That's my favorite superhero. And I have gotten almost 90% of the time, I get wow, that's a really boring character.
Yeah.
And, normally I just brush it off. But in my head, I'm like, well, that just tells me you've never read a comic book with Hal Jordan in it because Hal Jordan is not a boring character whatsoever. Just not everybody likes him.
I mean, there's people who say the same thing about Spider-Man. Yeah. They don't like him. They find him annoying.
Which I think is
and
weird.
Things like that.
Personally, I think that's weird. I love Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's my favorite hero. So, like, again, that's why I say, like, maybe a little hypocritical because they do the same shit with him over and over again.
Yeah.
You know, him and MJ just can't get a fucking happy ending to save their life.
Yeah, tell me about it. So I'm sure it goes as no surprise that while Mason, I wouldn't say, like you said, you didn't
enjoyed
hate it. You enjoyed it, but you just don't connect with Superman.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the best stories ever written, in my personal opinion.
I think it's a very well done origin story. Mm-hmm. Like, we'll get into it, but there was a part that I was not a super fan of, which you might be able to guess. It was in the second book or chapter or whatever of this.
Talking about the Legion of Superheroes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, there's a little bit of history with that.
And I'm sure we'll talk about it. But that moment right there really just kind of like knocked the book down for me a little bit.
Okay.
Because I just thought it was so out of left field.
Yeah.
That
I can understand that. That's kind of a Jeff Johns like thing. Whenever Jeff Johns writes a story, you better expect there to be some deep cuts in there because Legion of Superheroes are a super old group of heroes.
And I could tell via the art and the aesthetic that they did during that.
That's also Gary Frank's style. He loves drawing in classic style costumes.
And it was just, again, we'll get in more detail, but I just felt it was super unnecessary. Okay. Like, I really just felt like it was like a ha-ha nudge. Look, it's Brainiac.
But a good guy.
Yeah, like... That's what I felt like
Yeah.
whenever that part came around. But
Yeah.
overall, I enjoyed it. I definitely think if people are interested in getting into Superman comics, they should pick this up 100%.
So that Superman Secret Origins, which was released in 2010. It was either 2009 or 2010. I know that's when the deluxe hardcover came out, was 2010. That, as far as I know, is the in-canon origin story for Superman. So what we read is the in-canon origin.
Did that carry through to the New 52?
No.
Okay, that's what I was...
No.
Because I know they just wiped a lot of stuff.
No, Grant Morrison from Batman, Acclaim, and The Invisibles, and some other really good stuff, Final Crisis, they, they're non-binary, right?
Oh, okay.
So they wrote the origin for Superman for New 52, and it had very mixed responses. I have not personally read it because I was not into Superman when New 52 started. I was kind of in that same boat where I didn't find him to be that interesting of a character, especially in high school. I mean, you know me. I loved Green Lantern and Batman. Those were my two favorites. And then once I really, really got into comic books, like dedicated, I decided to give Superman a shot, and like I haven't looked back.
Yeah.
I do think New 52 kind of messes up the character a lot because they try to go the Man of Steel route where he's not connected to humanity. But that's a whole nother, storyline, and we'll cover it eventually. Even though I don't like it, we'll cover it. This, believe it or not, is the third Superman origin story post-Crisis. So, Crisis on Infinite Earths happened in 85. Ended in 86, I believe. And then in 87, they went to John Burns and said, hey, we want you to write the new post-Crisis Superman origin. Obviously, we've talked about post-Crisis or Crisis on Infinite Earths before with Batman Year One, where they needed to update a lot of their Golden Age, Silver Age characters to be more modern and more mature, more adult, because readers were growing up and expecting
to a
more
modern
mature
audience. Yeah.
They were expecting something more mature from their funny picture books, which you should, because comic books are, in my opinion, the best form of reading. And John Byrne did Man of Steel, which was really good. We'll cover that at some point. I don't want to, do Superman origin after Superman origin, because Superman has a lot of good stories. And that was the origin for Superman, I believe, until 2003. So 87 all the way to 2003. And then DC went to Mark Waid and said, hey, we want you to do a modern Superman origin, because it's 2003.
Yeah.
Hearing about a kid that grew up in the, 60s isn't relatable anymore. So he did. It's called Superman Birthright. Really good as well. Amazing. I hear a lot of people say that if you had to pick a Superman origin, it's between Secret Origin and Birthright because of how good both of those are. And Mark Waid did a really good job. Mark Waid, he actually had a run on Daredevil in 2013, 2014, I believe. I could be wrong about that. But he had a really long run of Daredevil, which completely reinvented the character. And a lot of people really liked that. He's done a few other things. He did, I believe, Justice League Year One, which we're going to cover fairly soon. And then Infinite Crisis happened, which is where Superboy Prime punched reality and changed the DC universe. That was a lot to take in, I'm sure.
It is, but at the same time, like, I get what you're saying. Yeah. Like, I feel it's pretty fucking common for publishers and whatnot for these comics to be like, it's been 20 years.
Yeah.
Back then, they thought we would have flying cars by now.
Yeah. Well, what's crazy about that is that Birthright came out in 2003, ended in 2004. And I don't even think it was a full year later, Infinite Crisis happened, and they wanted a new Superman origin again. Which is kind of wild.
I think that's just bad planning.
That is 100% bad planning. DC is known for their bad planning.
They're like, hey, give us a new modern origin. And they did. And then it got a year later, and they're like, oh, shit, this is when Infinite Crisis was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
You had a good year run.
Yeah.
Like,
They kept the origin until about 2000, like I said, 2009-ish, because this was only a 6-issue miniseries that took place outside of the main comic books. But they went to Jeff Johns, who had worked on Action Comics before this, and they said, "Hey, we want you to do the new Superman origin." And he was like, "Cool. It's going to be the Richard Donner Superman. That's what my inspiration is going to be." And you can see it all throughout the book. I don't know if you've ever seen Superman 7, the 1978 movie
No.
with Christopher Reeves in it,
I mean, I've obviously seen images of Christopher Reeves.
because it's iconic.
Yeah, and I can definitely see him in this.
Yeah, I mean, Gary Frank straight up just
Draws him.
Christopher
Yeah,
Reeves
yeah.
in this story.
But I've never seen it. But yeah, like it's
good.
just so iconic of a character that. Didn't they AI generated him in like fucking Flash?
No, that was the actual actor, I believe. Well, it wasn't the actual actor, sorry. Christopher Reeves, no, he could not act.
Yeah.
The guy that played Superman in Superman Returns, which was a part of the Donnerverse, like the Richard Donner universe, he came back to play Superman. And he played a Kingdom Come version of Superman.
I thought I was gonna say because I could have sworn in the because I never watched The Flash,
I didn't watch a whole lot of it either. I watched the first few seasons.
but I thought there was a whole like I guess controversy of like them using Christopher Reeve's likeness.
Maybe
when they were doing like when they were in like I don't even know what it is, but seeing all the different versions of Superman.
Oh, the multiverse.
Yeah,
the Infinite. Yeah, because it was Crisis on Infinite Earths that they did.
Yeah, so I thought there was some kind of controversy that happened of them like
There might have been
using Christopher Reeve's likeness.
I'd have to look into that and double check it. Just because I'm not too sure. 'Cause
Yeah.
I didn't watch that. But you can definitely tell that Richard Donner was a huge inspiration. The reason why is because David Goyer, who wrote that really bad Superman movie called Man of Steel with Henry Cavill in it. Love Henry Cavill, hate that movie. Shut up.
I like Man of Steel. I like obviously I don't know how terribly it adapts the source material, but
Really bad.
as a non-Superman reader, I enjoyed Man of Steel.
So, David Goyer was friends with Richard Donner. Worked for Richard Donner. Jeff Johns is friends with David Goyer. So, at the time this was coming out, David Goyer got inspiration to write his Superman story from Jeff Johns. And Jeff Johns was inspired by Richard Donner. There is a huge line of succession that inspired this story and future stories, even though I don't think Man of Steel hits the mark whatsoever.
Right.
But, there's that history. But either way, that's essentially how the book came to be. Jeff Johns, as a writer, now he has a little bit of controversy with him as of recent when it comes to like the Justice League movie that came out a few years ago, and some on-set drama that happened between him and some of the cast. I'm not speaking on that because I'm not well versed in it. I just know he wrote a really killer story, and he's written a lot of really good stories that I personally enjoy. So that's how I'm going to view it.
I didn't even realize there was problems on set.
Yeah, oh my God. That Justice League movie was doomed.
Well,
to fail.
I mean, obviously I knew there was problems considering that they had to re-release the whole Zack Snyder cut and all that.
Yeah. So Jeff Johns has an affinity, a real love for old characters. He worked on the early 2000s JSA, Justice Society of America comic, for a really long time, or at least for, a good portion of the run. And he really loves those old characters from the golden age of comics.
Which you can clearly see in this.
He also really loves Silver Age stuff, which is why we get Legion of Superheroes. Legion of Superheroes came out in, I think, around the 60s, 70s, maybe. They're pretty old.
Yeah.
Like, I did not know the Legion of Superheroes was a thing until there was an early 2000s cartoon show that came out with Superman that went into the future. So, And I don't even remember what it's called. I think it's just called Superman and the Legion of Superheroes. I think that's what it's called. I'll have to research that and maybe put a picture of it up in the video. But he really wanted to hone in on what made Superman so special.
Yeah.
DC really doesn't like that, because at this point in time, they were essentially saying, get rid of anything that resembles old.
Yeah,
because
it all new.
Because about 2 years after this, New 52 happens. So just think about that.
Yeah. I bet they were like, hey, for Superman's suit, give him armor.
Don't even start, man. Don't start with me. That is so crazy.
I bet you that was at least one conversation. I bet it was.
Don't even start with me. So that's essentially all the history you really need to know. There's a lot more stuff that went into this book than what I mentioned. It's just from a surface level. That's a lot of the information that I can give you. There are other people who are more well versed in that stuff than I am.
Yeah.
Of course, as of recent, I have been looking more into comic book news and interviews from back then, just so that way I can stay more up to date. I did get recommended this book actually from one of my favorite YouTubers that I was watching called Comic Pop. I've mentioned them before to you. Very big comic book YouTube channel. And when they released their episode on this is kind of when I first found out about it. And I'm glad, because I wouldn't have known about it otherwise, because I had read Birthright, but that was about it.
You're like, I have the origin story.
Yeah, but that was about it.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that their recommendation opened my eyes to a really good, just solid origin. And it's kind of, in my opinion, it's kind of hard to top this origin for another superhero. Like, I think Batman Year One and Green Lantern Secret Origin are both really good, but the other Year Ones, in my opinion, while they are good, haven't hit the same, in my personal opinion. Now, you have not read those other origins, so you might view it differently. Green Arrow Year One, pretty good. Wonder Woman Year One, what I thought was pretty decent, and it kind of solidifies that trinity. Yeah, I think
I was gonna say the only origin story that I have in my pocket as read is Spider-Man, and someone might correct me if they listen to this. I'm pretty sure they have not redone his origin story in the main comic run.
They did in the early 2000s, not the Ultimate Universe, in continuity. It was called Day One. And it was essentially Marvel testing the idea of doing a reboot like DC.
Yeah.
Because again, DC constantly reboots their continuity every so many years, while Marvel, all of it is one continuity. It's all canon. It all happened. There is no big universal reboot. In the early 2000s, they tried that called Day One and said, hey, everything that happened to Spider-Man, that never happened. We're retelling it all. And people hated it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Period. I only remember the original 50s.
Yeah, the really old.
Yeah, that's the only origin I remember from it. Other than the other awful moments where they reset time in some way, but we can discuss that if we ever get around to it. Yeah. But
well, other than that, I think the history lesson is done.
Yeah,
Ethan's history lesson. I don't know. I guess we should just get right into it.
Yeah.
So, I guess I'm going to take charge on this one since
this is your
this is my guy
thing.
So, chapter 1 begins. We get this really beautiful full page, spread of, Clark looking up into the sun, and it's really beautifully drawn. Let me just tell you, quick side tangent. I know we're just now getting into this. All the covers in this book are beautiful. Gary Frank he's like a top 5 artist for me. I don't know how you felt about the art in this book.
I have some thoughts.
Okay. Well, let's hear it.
Okay. So overall, the art was really good.
Yeah.
I like that. There's some serious shots in there that I'm like, this is awesome. I don't know what it was. But there are certain close-up shots of their faces that they have where it just looked off to me.
Like creepy?
Yeah, like a little creepy and weird.
That's the point. Now, Gary Frank is very good at drawing people like in the moment. Mm-hmm. And I've heard, people say that he draws people when they're not in the most flattering of light.
Right.
So you get pictures like Lex Luthor looking at the kryptonite, or maybe Lois Lane smiling because she sees Superman, and it's not the most flattering because they're in their most vulnerable moment.
A lot of times it wasn't even necessary. The moments that like threw me off were less like the side, like Lex and Lois and Jimmy and all that. Mm-hmm. There was just certain panels of Clark that just like something with the mouth. I don't know. It just was like, that's off-putting. Like it just kind of jarred me. Mm-hmm. Like the art overall is like really good. Just there were certain panels that just it just rubbed me the wrong way.
Okay, no, that's fine. In my opinion, I love these covers. I love the art. I think it's amazing. So we open up with Clark looking into the sun, and the first thing we hear is, "Why are you here?" Which is kind of echoed throughout the book in a sense. Not only, literally echoed by people asking him that, but metaphorically, because this is definitely a book about finding yourself and finding out who you want to be.
Which I feel is very origin story relevant.
Oh, yeah. Especially with a character like Superman.
Yeah, his whole thing's being hope, and stuff.
Like, you don't necessarily need that for Batman.
Yeah.
You don't need the whole, like, what kind of hero do I want to be? For Batman, it's like how do I strike fear into people?
Yeah. How do I be an effective hero rather than... Because, like,
what
Batman...
kind of man do I want to be?
Yeah, like, in Batman Year... we're really all over the place. But Batman Year One, we talked about the fact that, like, there was a moment where he was like, do I kill or do I not kill? Being, like, a symbol of hope and things like that. I don't think it was necessarily of why am I here? It's how do I efficiently turn this city around?
Yeah.
Is it going to be more effective?
It's very analytical.
Yeah, very analytical. Obviously, there's some personal to it because his parents were murdered.
Right.
So he doesn't want to turn around.
Yeah, and he does end up growing from that mindset. And then he turns into that symbol of hope for Gotham.
But he less wonders, why am I here?
Yeah, obviously. Like, their situations are very different because at this point, Clark has already developed his powers.
Yes.
And we see that in the first instance of the comic because he's actually playing with his high school friends because he's like a freshman in high school, I believe, freshman or sophomore. And he's playing with his friend Pete. He catches the ball and, Pete's coming after him and they're just doing the playful banter of like, you're going to lose.
I'm going to squash you.
Yeah. And, Pete charges at him to tackle him. Clark braces. And then you just see this loud crack on the panel and Pete broke his arm hitting Clark.
Yeah.
And the ambulance comes, all the parents come, and then Jonathan Kent comes to pick up Clark, and he confronts Clark about lying to him. Because Clark, before the comic started, told him, you told me you were going to go to the library, And that did not happen.
Nope.
And you get this really good moment where Jonathan's not really mad at Clark. He's just kind of like disappointed in his son. It's definitely
the dad, like, I'm not mad at you. I'm just disappointed.
Yeah. And, that's such a cliche and it's really funny. But with Jonathan, you really feel that.
Yeah. Well, he's Jonathan, from reading this, obviously I don't know much other than this comic run here, but he just seems like a very down-to-earth, well-meaning individual.
Yes, that's what he's supposed to be. He is supposed to be Superman's rock in the sense of if Superman doesn't know what to do, he will always go to his father for advice, even if it has something to do with like the superhero community. Yeah. There have been times where like fucking Darkseid is attacking and like the world is going to end and he doesn't know what to do, so he'll just go home and ask his dad.
Yeah,
I don't know. And his dad will tell you, well, son, you're going to do the right thing. You're going to, because, they're from Kansas. Yeah. So, like, of course he has a country accent.
Jonathan is his rock, but Martha keeps him from killing Batman.
Martha. More like that keeps Batman from killing him.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
How do you know that name? God, I hate that movie.
That's why I brought it up.
I fucking hate that movie so much. So, he's very disappointed in Clark, and then Clark just tells him, like, I wanted to play and be a normal boy.
Yeah.
Which is definitely something that all boys have felt. I know I felt it growing up. You felt it growing up. We've all felt a little bit outcasted, or maybe that we don't necessarily belong. And that's really exemplified in Clark, especially when he goes back to school the next day. Pete has the cast, and Pete's not upset with them.
Yeah.
He tells Clark, like, this is awesome, because all the girls are like signing his cast and shit. And
The pep squad. It's, what's her name? Lana.
Yeah, Lana Lang.
Yeah.
And Clark is really, upset by it, and then he bumps into Lana. And then, he definitely seems off, like something's wrong with him. And then we see that his X-ray vision activates. And he sees Pete's broken arm, and then he can see like everybody's skulls, all that kind of stuff, and it freaks him the fuck out because,
granted,
that's he's a teenage boy, and he runs away. Lana chases after him, and just so you know, Lana Lang is a long-standing girlfriend of Clark Kent.
I figured
from his childhood.
I figured she's probably kind of like that. I don't want to use the word competition, but like that. It's like Lois Lane and Lana Lang.
Kinda, not really. I see it more as Gwen Stacy, Mary Jane, before One More Day.
Oh, okay.
Where Gwen Stacy was Peter's like childhood friend and girlfriend.
Yeah.
And they were good together,
but they weren't great.
But they weren't perfect, especially after some stuff they came out with afterwards. And
don't get me started.
And it was nice, but you always felt like there was something kind of missing, especially because Gwen Stacy wasn't a very interesting character back in the day. I definitely think
with the whole that was them trying to make her interest
in the worst way possible.
In the worst way possible.
I definitely think the Ultimate Universe fixed her character
very
a lot.
Much so.
Because her character was very interesting in the Ultimate Universe. But that's essentially what Lana Lang is. She's almost, I don't want to call her a stepping stone because that's really reductive of her character.
Well, it's like the first love.
Yeah.
It's the part of the life journey. It's his first love, his first serious relationship.
Right. You can love someone, but that doesn't mean you're in love with them. Right. And that's essentially what this is. So he freaks out. Lana chases him, and she comforts him. Mm-hmm. And she reminds him of the first time they found out how strong he was. And it takes us to a flashback of them playing hide and seek. And one of the farm hands or farmers in the cornfield they were hiding in has this like thresher machine.
Cutting
corn, all that good stuff. And it's going to run Lana over. And without a second thought, Clark jumps to protect her. To show the kind of character that he has. Just kind of...
Not even knowing he could stop the blade.
It's kind of instilled into the reader that, like, Clark is just, at his core, a good person.
Yeah. Which I think, even though I'm a super edgy reader, I think it's always good to have a character of that sphere. Like, as much as similar feelings I have about Captain America as I do Superman, I appreciate that there is a character like that.
Yeah, because it helps balance out. It shows that the world isn't made up of these people who are willing to bend the rules.
Yeah, cynic.
Superman, he's not like a stooge. He doesn't like listen to the government, because Superman's belief is, I don't work for America. I work for everyone.
Yep.
I might wear the American flag as my outfit, but that's just because I was born here. That's it.
Yeah, he's the people's hero.
Right.
Excuse me.
He is supposed to represent everything that is good about humanity, even though he's not a human, which is awesome. So either way, he jumps in, and not knowing how strong he is, he just jumps in front of it, and it just destroys the thresher machine. Mm-hmm. Absolutely shatters all the blades, everything. And he says this really adorable line that, because Lana's like, oh my God, you're okay. And he's like, I'm stronger than steel. Which is awesome, because you get that Man of Steel reference. And it's like, of course a kid would think that, because like, who wouldn't? He's not gonna be like, I'm made of a titanium alloy. And it's really cute. I love that.
Yeah, so my thoughts on the writing, just briefly, is like I felt there was times that it was really well done, and then I thought there was other times where I was like, man, this is kind of super cheesy, which I felt was intentional. But at the same time, I think similar, like you had problems with Ghost Rider's kind of metaphoring to
The highway.
and stuff like that. I think at a certain point, it just kind of started grating on me. It's like, okay, I get it. He's a lovable goof.
Yeah.
But he's not an idiot either.
Right.
So I think it just got laid on a little thick at a certain point.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, then there was other times that I was like, okay, the writing's really good.
Yeah.
Like his first fight with a supervillain after going to Metropolis, I was like, okay, there's some good writing in there.
Yeah.
And but again, I definitely felt like I was like, okay, it's intentional. It'd be different if it was unintentional cheese.
Right. And I can understand why people wouldn't like that. Because, some people don't want cheese. They want seriousness. Because what you're reading is a serious story. Like, this is a story meant for adults.
Yeah.
If it wasn't, it wouldn't be designed after Christopher Reeves and Richard Donner shit.
Which I think there's a distinction between cheesy dialogue and lighthearted, fun dialogue.
Yeah.
Just because something's lighthearted and fun doesn't make it cheesy. But typically as a reader, you can tell when it's like...
Right. I kind of fall into the camp of I find it to be more lighthearted fun and more of a callback to Superman's history.
Yeah, which I guess maybe because I am not a Superman fan, it comes across as cheesy rather than lighthearted and fun.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I like it from my point of view. I like it because it kind of shows, it goes back to that, like, Superman is pure-hearted.
Yeah.
It shows that you have characters like Batman who are fucking insane and serious and monologue to themselves about how they are the Knight. And then you have a character like Superman who doesn't keep secrets. He just speaks his mind.
Yeah.
He sounds like a nerd. He sounds like a goofball because that's who Superman is. Like, he is a nerd.
Yeah. Again, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing.
Right.
I just think at a certain point, it just started to like grate on me.
Right.
Again, similar to Ghost Rider with you.
Yes, very much so. Now, my opinion of Ghost Rider did change after our episode.
Yeah, which I'm still keeping an open mind. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
I'm not sitting here being like, man, I can't wait to tear down Ethan's whole view of Superman. No, I'm very much hoping our conversation will kind of maybe change how I feel about it.
And if it doesn't, oh well. Like,
yeah.
I don't want to force you to like Superman. I do want to warn you that we're going to cover more stories of Superman.
I'm fine with that. This did not make me be like, I never want to read a fucking Superman comic again.
Right.
I am all for reading more Superman. You
just don't have the same connection and reverence for the character that I do.
I can appreciate his history and everything like that, but just again, something just doesn't grab me, and maybe it's because I want those monologues of I am a knight after Batman's dead mom locks him in his room and grounds him. I am the knight. Let me free. Things like that. But it's just, I don't know. But anyway, I need to stop defending myself.
No, you don't have to defend yourself. I went into this knowing you weren't a Superman fan, and I'm not trying to convert you. I just want you to have a good time. I want us to have a good time. And if you don't have the same reverence for the story, that's completely fine, because I enjoy hearing what you have to say about it, because it keeps me grounded in a sense.
I will have some things to say when we get to the second part.
Sounds good.
And we'll see if you keep that same energy.
Okay. So we do the flashback, we come back, and Lana Lang says this really nice thing to Clark of like, you're a good kid.
Yes.
Like, not everybody would have done that. And
for sure
you're special. Like, you're a very special boy. And then she goes in and she kisses him to like comfort him, and it triggers his heat vision
because he's getting hot and bothered. Which I find, this is a moment where I was like, okay, this is good writing, because they kind of make similar joke to it.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, how did it happen? And he's like, well, I was getting hot.
Yeah. So his heat vision activates, and it basically catches the school on fire.
Yeah.
He doesn't hurt anyone. Everyone gets out safely, but school is closed for the day, and all the kids go home. And Jonathan shows up, and he's like, "We're going home, son." And Clark is like, "Oh, but Pa," and he's like, "Now,
Yeah.
we're going home now."
Right.
He doesn't yell at him, but he's very stern with him. And Clark gets in the car and he says, like, I didn't mean to do it. It was a mistake. And all Jonathan says is, "I know."
Yeah.
Like he's not one of those dads who blows up at their kid, which is super refreshing because you can tell Jonathan is not from like a new age dad. Like he's very old fashioned,
Yes.
but he understands that like being tempered is going to be better for his son in the long run because of what his son can do.
Well, as much as we can sit here and say how Superman is these core ideals of like, being a good person and things like that. Truly, Jonathan Kent is the real superhero in the sense that he has these values, these core values of being a good man, an understanding man, honestly, just a good person.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have superpowers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Jonathan Kent the way that he's supposed to be written.
Yeah.
Not the way he's written in Man of Steel, who is okay with children dying, and he's telling his son that the world's going to fear him. That's not Jonathan Kent. This is Jonathan Kent.
Which I don't think that version of Man of Steel, Jonathan Kent, is necessarily wrong when they say they will fear you.
He's not wrong, but he's looking at it from a real world perspective, not I live in a comic book universe perspective.
Right. Yeah.
So they're having this conversation, and Clark, he ends the conversation with saying, like, "What is wrong with me?" And we immediately cut back to the Kent farm with Martha, his mom, saying, "There's nothing wrong with you. You're special."
Yeah.
And Clark is like, "You've said that before in the past." And she says, "I meant it then too. You're a really special boy."
Yeah.
And she's just a fucking good mom.
She's
just like Clark has the perfect childhood life in the sense of his like home life. Like his parents are just amazing.
Yeah.
And Clark he's asking all these questions because he's a teenager. Teenagers ask a shit ton of questions. And Jonathan eventually says, "I think it's time. Like it's past time that we tell our son who he is." And Martha's like, "I don't want to.
Nope.
That's my baby boy. If we tell him, it will change everything." And Jonathan says, we don't get, he basically says, we don't get to decide that. He needs to know who he is. And so they take him out to the barn, and they, while they're walking him out to the barn, we do get a couple flashbacks of like instances in which his powers activated. Like he blows out the candles and there's like a bunch of ice everywhere. Or, he, breaks I forget what he broke. It was like he broke the thresher, obviously. And then he breaks another thing. I forget what it was, but either way, they take him to the barn, and then they reveal his rocket, the thing that he crash landed in. And they essentially say, like, your birthday isn't December 1st. That's the day that this landed in front of us, and we found you. Which is interesting, but also like not technically correct, because they have established in continuity that the rocket is a birthing pod. Like Clark, in some instances, Clark was not a baby that was put into the rocket. He was essentially like DNA, and the pod grew him.
I've always understood it as like literally he was born like the day Krypton fell.
That is my interpretation, and that's what I like to say, but obviously that is probably not correct, but I agree.
That makes the most
to me it does
sense.
Because in like the Superman animated series, he's like a toddler. Like I think he's like 2 or 3 at that point. In the Man of Steel movie, I think he's a newborn.
Yeah.
In I think there's one continuity where he's like 5 or 6 when they send him, which wouldn't make sense because
he would know.
Yeah, he would know everything about Krypton.
Yeah.
So they show him the ship, and Clark is like, "This is fucking awesome." Like, you're telling me I came from a ship? I'm a fucking alien? That's cool. And then he touches it, and the rocket activates, and it projects this huge hologram of Jor-El and Lara-El, his biological parents. And they give him this speech of like, you come from this dying planet named Krypton. I was one of the foremost scientists of Krypton. Our planet was dying, but our political leaders wouldn't listen to me. And so I designed this ship to take you somewhere called Earth, where you will basically, because of the yellow sun
Because the
radiation,
environment.
yeah, the radiation of the yellow sun will basically turn you into a god, and you will get to live amongst them. But remember, you're not one of them.
And his attitude quickly changed.
Oh yeah,
From being, man, I came from a rocket ship to fuck this shit, I'm out.
yeah. Because Martha is crying. Jonathan is kind of sitting there like, oh my God, your parents suck.
Yeah.
And he, Clark gets angry. He freaks out and he shoots his heat vision at the rocket. The crystals on the rocket actually absorb the heat vision.
Mm-hmm. They technically also break a little bit because that's what they end up using.
Yeah,
for his glasses.
He ends up punching it, and it these like little circular discs come off that are the same crystals. And like you said, Martha ends up making glasses out of them. He runs out of the barn, crying, freaking out. Jonathan finds him, and there's just this really sweet moment where Clark is essentially like, "Why can't I just be normal? Why can't I just keep being your being your son?" Mm-hmm. And Jonathan hugs him and says, "You are my son."
Yeah. Very tender, sweet moment.
Very tender, very, very awesome. I mean, that just saying it, like I can feel it already, but that's when every time I read it, I tear up. That is such a sweet.
It definitely made me kind of choke up a little bit because, again, like we're really, with that moment, we're really hitting the whole, why am I here? What is my purpose? Kind of theme throughout this really hard. So it was a really well done. And then again, that's why I reinstate that sometimes the writing is cheesy, but then you have moments like this where it's just really well done.
Yeah, Jeff Johns is really good at that. Really good at giving you very personal moments, which makes me excited for his Green Lantern stuff that we're going to cover, because he just absolutely knocks it out of the park when it comes to Green Lantern. Like, he just understands that character to a T. So at the same time as this is happening, we actually get a very cool moment where, well, I say cool, but it's just an introduction, where Lex Luthor, as a kid, who is in Smallville, which a lot of people don't know that he's from Smallville. I believe in some continuities they change it to where he's always been from Metropolis or something. But the most popular, and in my opinion, the best form of origin is that he is also from Smallville. And
have you seen the show Smallville?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's from Smallville in the show. Still a cool show.
Yeah.
I do think it's dated, but it's still cool. So he's running away from his abusive drunk father, and while he's running out, he actually trips over a chunk of kryptonite, and that kind of ignites Lex Luthor's obsession of, like, I am going to be something. I'm going to make something of my name. And it's cool. It's a really cool origin for him. It's a really cool start. Obviously, we see more of Lex, in further chapters as a child, but I think he gets very interesting when he becomes an adult. Obviously, there's been a lot of different incarnations of Lex Luthor. I know before Crisis on Infinite Earths, 2 separate stories. Before Crisis on Infinite Earths, he was like just a mad scientist that put on a suit and beat up Superman sometimes. In this, they wanted to make him like a businessman.
Yeah.
Like
it was very apparent.
Yeah.
Obviously, the best version of Lex Luthor is Jesse Einsberg.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right. I mean, you can have the wrong opinion.
I'm just finding all the moments I can pick and prod at you.
I do think Jesse Eisenberg's a great actor. I thought he would have been a great Riddler. Obviously, I think I forget the actor's name, but the actor that played Riddler in the most recent Batman movie, phenomenal.
Paul Dano.
Yeah, phenomenal.
Very
actor.
good job.
Yeah, but I think Jesse Eisenberg, if they wanted to go for a more like classic Riddler, Jesse Eisenberg would have been the pick.
Give him a bowler hat.
Yep, you can put him in the green and purple tux and
Yeah.
send him on his way. I thought that would have been great, but no.
But they're like, hey, we want you to be a corporate Joker.
Yeah. That fucking sucks. I don't even want to think about that anymore. I know you're going to remind me.
Oh, for sure. You can be like, hey, remember that awesome moment where Jesse Eisenberg is just like... Anyway.
So we get introduced to Lex, and then we cut to the next day, or some point in the future. And Clark now has glasses. And we establish that his mom makes them, and she's a super fucking intelligent person because she had the foresight to see that Clark used his heat vision. It didn't work on the crystals. Therefore, we should make glasses out of them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, Martha, where the fuck have you been?
And she also is like, hey, I need your heat vision to make this blanket.
Because this blanket's super fucking strong, too.
Yeah, and I'm tired of your ripped jeans and shit like that. We got to go to the Walmart that's 2 hours down the road.
Yeah, because they live in bumfuck nowhere.
Yeah. Trust me, I know all about that.
So Jonathan takes Clark to school. Martha, tells him, like, you look so handsome in your glasses. You'll grow into them because they're massive. And then she goes back into the barn and she activates the ship. And that's when we get a really cool scene of Jor-El essentially explaining all of Krypton's mistakes in the form of villains that Superman will face. Because you see Doomsday, who is that big bony monster. You see General Zod, and you see Brainiac's ship. And, at first Martha's like, oh my God, my son is going to be fucking brutalized. And then it cuts to Kryptonian society and Jor-El saying, like, this was what our culture was like. Like, Krypton was super advanced and, like, peace was, like,
And she was like, it's
thing.
lovely.
Yeah, yeah. And she, she's very much like, oh, that is so cool looking. And I'm like, damn, you're very impressed, easily impressed. Mark.
By a set of stairs.
Yeah.
And people walking down them.
So Clark is being made fun of at school for his glasses. And the fact that he keeps making up excuses to not play football or do sports and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And Pete's essentially saying, like, hey, man, you're really killing my vibe.
Yeah.
You need to stop with this whole nerd act and get back to how you used to be. And Clark is like, this is how I've always been. Obviously, that's not truthful.
And Pete literally calls bullshit.
Yeah. And he's like, you are a fucking liar. And Lana even, like, calls him out on it, like, you're a terrible liar. And Clark says, I've never been good at it.
Yeah.
That's why I don't lie.
Which remains true
Oh, yeah.
forever.
Yeah. And Lana's like, well, if you're not going to play football with Pete and the others, can you at least help me at the county fair? Mm-hmm. And he goes, and he actually ends up bumping into Lex Luthor because he goes to Lex's tent.
Yes.
Because Lex is selling a bunch of books. And he finds a book that says, Are We Alone? And it has an alien on it. And Clark is super interested in it because now he knows he's an alien. And he wants to know more about himself. He wants to know, like, more of what people think about the world.
Yeah.
And he meets Lex, and Lex is like, he is an asshole.
Oh, 100%.
He is, because I've always said this my entire life. He has the worst trait in a person you can possibly have, in my opinion. And that is that he is an expert in everything.
He is better than you in any way possible.
Yep. He will always have more knowledge in something than you will. And I fucking hate it.
And it's like a condescending, like, I'm just better than you.
Like, how you're so stupid. How could you not have known that? That kind of response.
Also, it's like they're giving him the trope, I guess, or whatever, of he's the only smart guy. Like, he presents I'm the only smart guy in this entire bumfuck town, and that's why I'm better than you individuals. And it's like,
All right, asshole.
All right.
But I do like it because he's supposed to be that way.
Yeah.
I do understand why they wrote him that way.
I mean, and to be fair, his home life is kind of shit.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
so.
Now, that doesn't excuse all the murder.
No.
You know, terrorism. And
But you got to start somewhere.
yeah. It doesn't stop the fact that he helped an old god named Perpetua in the universe and create a new one. But, you know.
I mean, like,
You have no idea what I'm talking about.
daddy issues, am I right?
Yeah.
You've never wanted to end the universe before? I have.
I can't say that I have. All right, so so you know, he's talking to Clark, and they're having a decent conversation.
Yeah.
You can obviously tell that Lex doesn't necessarily see Clark in the brightest of light. He does make a nice comment of, "You wear glasses. That means you read a lot." And Clark kind of proves that he does read a lot.
He's like, you're either genetically inferior or you read a lot.
Yes, that's what he says. And it is cool because he proves that he does actually read a lot. And, you know, he names off people. And, you know, Lex is actually a little impressed by it.
But it's also funny, he's like, you're genetically inferior when technically he's genetically superior in everywhere.
In every single way possible. Yep. So they're having the conversation about, are we alone? And then he says, like, hey, Clark, do you believe in extraterrestrials? And then he brings out the jar with the kryptonite in it. And it instantly fucks Clark.
Yeah, he like passes out on the spot.
He passes out. He ends up breaking the jar, like knocking the jar out of Lex's hand, breaks it. Lex picks up the glass and it cuts him. And at the same time, they were kind of building up to it in the background. But there's a storm rolling in. Yeah. And then a spontaneous tornado just lands in the middle of this county fair. I'm not from Kansas, so I don't know what Kansas is like. If Kansas has spontaneously spawning tornadoes, I'm never going to Kansas.
Have you ever seen the old classic Wizard of Oz?
Yes.
Maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe it's Mandela
she's also
effect.
from Kansas.
She's from Kansas.
Yeah.
In the scene where she's standing outside and like the tornado is happening, I think the way they did the set or something like that, there's also like several tornadoes in the background happening. Maybe again, Mandela effect, and I'm not remembering correctly, but it's like a apocalyptic tornado scenario happening.
Yeah, that's. I need to look that up now so I can see it. That sounds
again,
insane.
I could be wrong, but it just was like they were like, we really need to emphasize a tornado is happening, so let's have like 5 in the background.
That is fucking funny. I need to look that up.
I really hope I'm not misremembering that.
I hope you're not either, because that would make that movie way more entertaining.
Just think about all those people going to wherever that land is. The Munchkin land.
Yeah. Just fucking Farmer Bill ends up getting put on the yellow brick road, and he sees all the little people, and he's like, the fuck? We're a part of the Lollipop Guild. Get the fuck off my property, asshole.
Technically, you're on our property.
He grabs his shotgun. Now get off.
I'm going to do this the old American way. This is mine now.
All right, now that fucked up joke is done. So this tornado hits Smallville. This tornado hits Smallville, and Lana is caught up in it.
Yeah.
She ends up getting knocked down in the panic, and she gets caught up in it, and Clark sees her get knocked down, and he's screaming her name, and he's not even thinking, he's just running. And you see this really cool, these cool panels of Clark running, and then one foot gets off the ground, and then the other foot gets off the ground, but the other one hasn't landed. And he catches her, and he's flying through the tornado. Like, he gets his ability to fly. And then they just go tumbling across the county.
And land in, like, a creek or something like that.
Yeah, surprisingly, they don't break, she doesn't break her neck from it, because they land pretty hard. And she kisses him, and the glasses work.
He's like, are you okay? And he's, like, in mid-sentence, and she just plants a kiss on him. And, it shows his eyes getting all heated. Yeah. And, his glasses work.
Yeah, it's awesome. So he gets home and he tells his parents about, the tornado. And he's like, you know, I flew. I caught her. I saved her, and then we the glasses worked. That's all he says. The glasses worked.
Yeah.
And you know, his parents they're just smiling and they're going along with it, and they can tell that their son's happy, so that makes them happy. And you know, he says like, I want to keep helping people.
Yep.
And his mom's like, well, you're not going to do that in those clothes because I'm tired of buying you new clothes and going down to Walmart 2 hours away.
Yeah.
And she's like, I grabbed these blankets out of your rocket so that way we can make you an outfit to do your saving and stuff. Because at this point, superheroes aren't around.
Yeah.
At least for the most part. Because the JSA still existed way before this. And, you know, Clark's like, well, what if... Because she says, like, I drew up these designs. They're inspired by Krypton fashion. And Clark is essentially like, well, what if Krypton's a bad place? Yeah. And Jonathan just says, well, if it gave you to us, then it can't be a bad place. Which is just a really cool moment.
Dropping that Midwestern wisdom.
Yeah. And, you know, he's arguing. He's like, this design is so lame. I am not going to put that on. And Jonathan's like, now your mother went through a lot of trouble getting this design. And also she went through a lot of scissors and my chainsaw and a lot of stuff getting it cut up. So you're going to help her. And he's like, you don't want to disappoint your mom, do you? And he's like, you get me all the time. And he's like, I know. And he comes down and they're both really excited. And they're like, oh my gosh.
It's like prom night.
Yeah. And Jonathan's like, Martha, don't you think that looks a little tight? And she's like, oh, it looks so adorable. And he says, get a good long look because I'm never wearing it this again. And it's such a cool reveal of like little Clark in the suit, which calls back to like the 50s where they did a little side series called The Adventures of Superboy. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's just a really cool little homage to that. And that's essentially where chapter 1 ends.
Yep.
Chapter 2 is when we get introduced to the Legion of Superheroes.
Yep.
Now, there's a few things that happen before that.
Yes. I will say right off the bat, I like the first half of this. I like seeing Superboy do his heroing around Smallville and stuff like that. And I like the tone and the direction the first half of this has. Him struggling to like feel normal, like obviously we'll go through it, but like, you know, pushing people away because he feels different. He feels he is not part of humanity.
Yeah.
I really liked all that. And then they were like, hey, child, we're from the future. Let us take you to the future and kidnap you.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, why? You like all the messaging that happened with him going to the future could have easily been conveyed in a more fluid version with his day-to-day life.
Okay.
Like, I feel besides the nudge of like, hey, it's Brainiac. That's a villain of his, but he's good. Isn't that strange?
Yeah.
I think it was also to be like, look at the hope that you eventually give the world.
Right.
One, Brainiac's not in this story at all, except for when he goes to the future. So there's no real reason to be like, other than a nod and a smirk to the reader.
Well, I will say he's not the leader, but Brainiac is a huge character in the Legion of Superheroes.
Right.
Okay.
I'm just saying, like, if you had taken this future traveling out, you wouldn't really lose a lot.
I could understand that.
Like, I felt it wholly unnecessary. And if they wanted to get the motifs of, like, look at what you become or things like that, they could have done it more consistently and fluid with the rest of the story. Okay. I felt it was hugely unnecessary, and it just yanked me right out of the story.
Okay.
Like, I also understand it's a huge nod to the older comics and things like that, like even with the visual aesthetic of all the superhero suits and like the future. It looked very much like the future that the 60s thought was going to be.
Right. And Jeff Johns also has a reverence for this group because he also worked on a Legion of Superheroes comic in the early 2000s. So,
Which I get it and stuff like that. It didn't make me hate the book or anything.
Yeah.
It's just like, when I got to that part, I was like, okay, I'm ready to
get done with it.
Get done with it as soon as possible, you know.
Thankfully, they're not around for long.
Yeah.
So if it takes you out of it, it's it's not.
It's what I think maybe.
It's just one chapter.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how many pages in the chapter it is. I think it's maybe like.
I think it's about halfway through.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about halfway through the chapter that the Legion of Superheroes are introduced. And we'll gloss over that part just because it's not in depth.
Yeah, and I think that's my problem. If you were gonna introduce do this, make it more integral to.
I will say it is integral in the larger scale of things because what it does is it allows Superman to practice being Superman before he is ready to go to Metropolis. So that's why he's so good at the things that he does before he even gets there.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, but it still doesn't necessarily sell me on it.
Right.
Because, granted, he doesn't have to pull the Batman and be like, I'm going to dress up in a ski mask and go out there and save people. But
yeah.
I mean, there's multiple things he could do to practice in the real world. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Heat vision wise. I'm sure they got guns in Kansas and they got target practice. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Shoot some clay pigeons in the air and try and, shoot them out of the air. X-ray vision, pretty self-explanatory, you know? Your fucking freezing breath, your ice breath, you can practice that anytime out in the wilderness.
Right.
Really the only thing I guess you would need practice on is catching people and not killing them when you catch them.
Yeah, because you fly at Mach speed.
Yeah. I don't know. I just really didn't like this part of
the chapter.
Yeah.
I can understand that. So the chapter does open up with Lex Luthor's father driving down this mountainside and his brakes don't work. He loses control of the truck because he also sees that there's a landslide on the road and he's going to die. And then you see this red flash go right past his car. And we get this really awesome full panel view of Superboy Clark Kent catching the truck.
Yeah.
He, the Lex's father goes to the precinct, the county police department. They call Lex Luthor and, it's revealed, the commissioner basically says it's a miracle that your father survived. And Lex says miracles don't exist.
Yeah.
And then it's revealed that he was studying up on how to work on vehicle brakes. And you see a pair of pliers.
Yeah.
And you kind of get the feeling that maybe he's trying to kill his dad. And we just get a nice little montage of Superboy saving people. Martha and Jonathan are cutting out paper clippings of sightings of the Superboy.
And hanging them up.
Yep. And Clark is like, God, I hate this fucking suit. And he's like, the first chance I get, I'm putting the underwear on the inside. Kind of making fun of people who are like, Superman shouldn't wear trunks on the outside.
Yeah.
And then Martha says, for the love of God, please tell me you're wearing underwear under that. And he's like, I'm not a baby. Of course I'm wearing underwear underneath my costume. It's just a cool little moment. And then it cuts to Clark using a telescope to look out into space, and then he uses his vision, his super vision, to see further out than the telescope. And then Jonathan comes up and he says, you seen anything? And Clark's like, no, not really. There's a lot out there. And Jonathan's like, yeah, it's a huge place. There's so much out there that not even your vision can see it. And then Clark says, do you think I'll always be alone? And Jonathan just says, you're never going to be alone.
Yeah.
Basically saying like you'll always have us, like you're always our son, and also metaphorically kind of hinting at the fact that he will revolutionize like the modern age of superheroes in DC universe, where his appearance will inspire people to be the best version of themselves, and sometimes that requires them to put on the costume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also referencing the fact that, you know, you have like Crypto the dog and, you know, Power Girl and all these other Kryptonians that are still
Right. Like
alive
yeah.
somehow.
Now I will say at this point, I don't know if Supergirl is alive because during Crisis on Infinite Earths, they killed Supergirl
Right.
back in the 80s. And she was dead for a while, kind of like Barry Allen. She might be back at this point, so she might be in continuity. I'm not sure. Though she came back during Jeff Loeb's run of Batman Superman, Public Enemies. Or I think it was not, it wasn't Public Enemies, it was the arc right after that, where they fight Doomsday.
Okay.
And Supergirl comes back. That might have come out before this book, so you know, just that. So we cut to Clark at school in the library reading his book, the Are We Alone? And Lex Luthor basically just busts his balls and says, "I'm going to give you the quick answer. No.
Yeah.
Like, don't waste your time reading a book by a dried up hack who's well past his prime." And Clark is essentially like, I don't think it's that bad of a book.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty good. I'm interested in it. And then Lex, you know, shows him this big, I don't know what the hell this book is. I've never seen a book like this, but he plumps it down. It's like a huge, massive book. And it just says Metropolis on it. And then he opens it up and it's immediately a huge map of the city.
Yeah.
I don't know what this book is, but he tells Clark, like, this is the city of tomorrow. This is where people's dreams come true.
Yeah, this is where people go to make actual change
Yeah,
and stuff in the world.
And he essentially tells Clark, like, I'm going to make change.
Yeah.
And it kind of inspires Clark to be like, oh, Metropolis. Like, I want to go. That sounds cool. Which is kind of funny that Lex Luthor inadvertently inspires Superman to come to Metropolis
And kick his ass.
which fucks everything up for him.
I also like the fact that he was like, do you know why Smallville is called small? Or Smallville? And Clark's like, because it's small? And he's like, yes, because it's small thinking, things like that.
Yeah, the people that live here are
small.
small-minded.
Yeah.
You know?
I like that.
I do too. And then, you know, Clark is like, he tries to extend an olive branch to Lex because he notices that Lex doesn't really have a whole lot of friends. He's like, we should hang out sometime. And Lex is like, why the fuck would I do that?
Yeah.
And he just leaves.
He's like, get away from me, nerd.
And he leaves. I almost said Connor. Clark talks to Lana about the interaction, and you know, Clark is essentially like, I don't feel like I belong here. You know, this, like, I'm not like everyone else. Blah blah blah. And Lana's trying to tell him like you're just as human as everyone else here. And then she goes to give him a kiss.
The wrong choice of words right now.
Right. And she goes in to give him a kiss, and he breaks it off. He's like, I care about you a lot, but I'm not looking for anything more than a friendship.
Yeah, which I think is true, but also not true in the sense of he was crushing on her.
Oh yeah.
You know,
it's
definitely a reaction to finding out that he's not human.
Yeah. And I will say, I think this is also their way of expressing that Clark does not want people to get attached to him because he's not staying.
Yeah.
Like, he's already determined that he is leaving Smallville.
Yeah.
So she leaves. She's obviously upset with him. I believe that's the last time we see her. We do not see her at all after this. Yep. She is out of the story now. Clark, using his super hearing, hears the other people at school making fun of him, calling him creepy, all kinds of stuff. And then that's when he hears a voice behind him, and he turns and he sees Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, and Lightning Lad, who are 3 members of the Legion of Superheroes. Cosmic Boy, I believe, is the leader of the Legion. Mm-hmm. And Do not ask me what their powers are. I cannot name any of them for you except for like 3 characters. Brainiac 5 he's Brainiac. Lightning Lad, self-explanatory. And Saturn Girl, who is an alien, her power is that she's like a telepath.
Yeah. Aren't they all technically aliens?
Yes, I think they're all aliens.
Yeah.
Because from the future, where they're from Superman-inspired aliens from other planets to come to Earth and become superheroes as well.
Yeah, and also the aliens in general. Because, like, whenever they go to the future, you do see there are alien civilians living there.
Yeah.
And things
So
like
essentially, Superman acted as like the poster child of saying like, "Hey,
all are welcome.
all are welcome here. This is a home for all walks of life."
Yeah.
Which is cool. So they go back in time, and they essentially go back to just tell him thank you because he's their inspiration. He's the reason why they become superheroes. And Saturn Girl tells him like, "I know what you're feeling is really heavy right now, but just know in the future you will do things that will shape history as we know it, and you will not always you will not be alone. Like, you will end up inspiring people like Batman, Wonder Woman. They'll become your best friends. Obviously, you have Lois. You know, eventually you have Jonathan, which he wasn't created in this story, or before this story, but they don't say all that. But as a reader looking back on it, it's implied.
Yeah.
And they're about to leave. They're about to go back to I think it's called the Chronosphere, which is like their time travel.
Sphere.
The time sphere, yeah. Because I think they're from the same time period that Booster Gold is from, which Booster Gold is one of my favorite superheroes. But Booster Gold's different. He wears like an experimental suit that can travel through time. And that's an awesome character. I love Booster Gold. We'll definitely cover him. And as they're about to leave, Clark essentially says like, "Let me come with you. I want to see this future. Yeah. Like, I want to see what you're talking about that I inspire." And at first, Cosmic Boy's like, "I don't know about that. You might really fuck some stuff up."
Yeah.
And Lightning Lad's like, "Come on.
Nah, it'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Come on, bring him on."
What's the worst happen? We can all be erased from time and space.
Yeah, and that's essentially what like Brainiac says. He's like, "Oh, you fucking idiots.
Yeah.
What are you doing?" But they take Clark to the future. I believe it's the 30th century or the 31st century, which is like super far in the future. And it's cool. I like it. It's very simple. There are some, I guess you would call them racist, either racist or specious.
I think it's supposed
people
to be,
who don't like aliens.
Yeah, they're essentially like future space Nazis in a way,
because they call them human supremacists.
Yeah, so I think it's supposed to be, I mean, a nod to the fact that way back, Superman was punching like Nazis and stuff like that, very similar to like Captain America and everything like that.
Beating up the Klan, that kind of shit.
Yeah, that kind of shit. I think it was a nod to that. Which, good on him.
Yeah, it's a cool callback.
Punch him in the fucking face.
And the Legion and Superman absolutely whooped their asses. Rightfully so. And, there's this kind of like a cheesy moment where one of the human supremacists says, "Death to the Legion." And then because they tell him like, you got to be quippy. Like, that's what you do as a superhero. You're quippy. Mm-hmm. And, one of the guys says, "Death to the Legion." And then Superman's like, "Long live the Legion." And then he just backhands the dude.
One of the moments in that fight that made me roll my eyes was when the villain was like, "You got me last time, Lightning Lad, but lightning never strikes the same spot twice." And then just Lightning Lad like shoots him with electricity. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. And I just chalk that up to it's the era they're from. They're fucking cheesy.
Like, I was just like, oh my God.
So they whoop these dudes' asses. The police show up and they're like, or the time police or something like that. They're not the time police. I think they're just the fucking police. And they're like, "Hey, you fucking kids, we told you to stop because
you're unregistered."
Because it essentially like the human or the Meta-Human Registration Act from Marvel happens in DC and it's like real, like it actually happens. And you cannot be a superhero if you're under the age of 18. I'm going to assume because people found out that Robins were fucking dying left and right. And they were like, enough of that.
Hey, Bruce, What's with all the child labor that's going on over here?
This Robin obviously has a different voice and costume from the last one. What the fuck?
Yeah, the last Robin I saw definitely looked like he was like 20. This is a child.
So, they're hanging out, and then Brainiac 5, Phantom Girl, and not Duplicate. Duplicates from Invisible. Triplicate Girl.
Yeah, triplicate.
Yeah, duplicates from Invincible.
Yeah.
But Brainiac 5, Phantom Girl, and Triplicate Girl all show up.
That's
and
awful.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, they all have shitty names. They all have fucking awful names. Brainiac is the only one that has a cool name.
You know what? It's not a negative. The vibe that I get from this is like whenever I was a long time ago, when I was a child, a wee little lad, I would go over to one of my aunts and with my grandma, and they would hang out and talk, and I'd be stuck watching the shitty little tube TV that was like in their den area. And the only thing that was ever seemingly on was Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Oh, yes. I know exactly what you're talking about because I had the exact same thing.
Firestar and Iceman. Yes. And this is the vibe that I get from it. And part of me it adores it, but also part of me is like, I'm tired of this.
Yes, I 100% know what you're talking about, and I completely agree. It is just like that.
Yeah.
That is an awesome reference. I'll never get that out of my head now when I read this. So Brainiac 5, essentially, he gives Cosmic Boy and Lightning Lad the business.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are fucking idiots. You understand that if he finds out anything about his past, like, our timeline's done. It'll get erased. And Cosmic Boy is essentially like, I know I fucked up, but he's Superman. Like, he is the greatest superhero that will ever live. And he needed to know what he's working towards.
Yeah.
Which is cool. The only problem I have with that is the future that he works towards is still somewhat kind of shitty in the aspect of people abuse power, and there are still a lot of problems in regards to the superhero community, especially with like the whole Registration Act,
right,
where you have to know, like the government has to know who you are if you want to be a superhero, which I'm Team Captain America all the way, even though I prefer Iron Man as a character. I think it's dumb.
Yes.
The government should not know who you are if you're a superhero because they will abuse the shit out of that.
Because it'll just end up being like every other kind of entity, bureaucratic entity of throw my tinfoil hat on real quick. It's just going to end up corrupt.
100%. Which is, they kind of touch upon that in, I believe, Doomsday Clock, which is an event that's actually drawn by Gary Frank and written by Jeff Johns. And essentially, the government reveals that they were making superheroes in case Superman ever went AWOL.
Yeah.
And they reveal, because there's this huge conspiracy called the Supermen conspiracy, where as nuclear deterrence to Superman and other countries, the government started creating superheroes.
Yeah.
And keeping it a secret. So like Firestorm, Man-Bat, Killer Frost, those are all government created characters.
Red Tornado also?
I don't know. I would have to look at Doomsday Clock again because it's been a while since I've read it. But back in like I think the Golden Age or Silver Age, he was created by a villain. Like Red Tornado used to be a villain.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Wasn't Red Tornado made as a like kind of way to combat Superman?
I don't know about that. I would need to do some research on Red Tornado because I'm not super well versed in the character. So I'll do some research on that, and we'll definitely cover Doomsday Clock because that story is wild. It's good. When I say wild, let me just say it's good.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, but Superman is kind of the main character of that story.
But
it is a Justice League story.
Right.
Like all the characters are involved, but Superman plays a huge role. So Brainiac 5, he confronts them, and he essentially says like, look, if time gets fucked up, it's on you. But at the end of the day, we probably won't exist if it does. So who cares?
Yeah.
and
he's also like, well, if you're so smart, Like he says to Brainiac, he's like, well, if you're so smart, why don't you figure out a way that we can show him around
Yeah.
and not fuck up the time continuum? And Brainiac's like, challenge accepted. And he's standing there trying to think of it as they fly away.
Yeah. And it is cool because they do talk about like, hey, he can't know that he dies. That'll really fuck him up if he finds out that at some point he will die. And, you know, obviously I've heard the argument of like, well, how did he not hear that? Because he has super hearing. But it is really, you know, funny because you see the girls like surrounding him. And so he's kind of like distracted by them. So they go on their little adventures. They give him a Legionnaire ring, which is cool because he always keeps it. And then he tells his mom and dad about going to the future. And
and they don't bat an eye. They're just like, yeah, I believe you.
Let me be honest. If my son was an alien from the stars that was basically God, I would believe anything he said. Because at that point, anything is possible. Jonathan is a good old-fashioned Christian man, and I don't know how at this point.
Yeah.
Granted, in the DC and Marvel universe, all religions are right.
So Jesus is a real person?
In both universes, yeah. Because in DC, he's the presence, which is like an old man that wears a business suit and a bowler hat, and that's God. And in Marvel, I think it's the Beyonder, I believe, is God. Because he creates everything.
Then I really want a comic of just Jesus fighting either Marvel or DC villains. That's all I want.
There is Secret Wars 2.
Please tell me Jesus is fighting in that.
The Beyonder, essentially, it's just a book about him wanting to be a human. It's really bad, and we'll cover it. We'll cover it.
Oh, that's so funny.
So yeah, he's telling his parents, and you know they're just having a good old time. And he's like, "Well, that's really cool. So I'm glad you're liking it." And you know, his mom's like, "So you like the suit now?" Because he says like, "Oh, I can wear my suit, and no one thinks it's weird."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, it's all right. It's cool. I like it."
He's like, you know, it's okay.
It's not as bad as I thought.
Yeah. Even though he actually really likes it now.
Yeah. And then everything starts rumbling, and you know they're like, "Oh my god, it's an earthquake!" And Clark, with his vision, he's like, "It's not an earthquake."
Yeah.
And he sees a ship similar to his starting to crash. He goes and catches it, and he's ready to fight whatever comes out of it. And then you just hear a bark,
which is crypto.
Yeah, it's crypto, which is so cool.
That's why I mentioned it.
Earlier. It is. It's really awesome. And we cut to later that same day, and the police are giving Lex the bad news that his father died.
The bad news.
Yeah, the bad news. Because they essentially say, because I think Lex says something along the lines of like he has a bad heart, and even the police chief is like, there's no medical records of that happening or of him having any like health issues, but whatever.
But also they do know he's kind of like a town drunk.
Yeah, he is a menace to the town.
Yeah.
And so they just drop it. And Lex ends the chapter by saying, "This is my last day in Smallville." And it shows that book of Metropolis and the insurance forms, the life insurance form from his father.
Yep.
And that's how chapter 2 ends. And then we immediately get a time skip.
Yep. To Clark Kent as the mild-mannered reporter.
Yep. This is, in my opinion, this is kind of where the story really kicks off.
Yeah.
Pacing wise.
I would agree.
Not that the first 2 chapters were bad in my eyes. I thought the first chapter was fantastic. I understand your issues with the second chapter, even if I enjoyed it.
See, I think what they could have easily done was take that first half of the second, just lump that in with the first one.
Okay.
Cut that whole future, and I think you still could have had... Because I don't think anyone reading Superman, when he becomes like full-on Superman, you know, Clark Kent, the reporter, everything like that, no one's wondering like, how did he get good at this? You know what I mean?
I guess, yeah, because you can always chalk it up to he's Superman.
Yeah, it's Superman.
Of course he's going to be good at it. Because, like, admittedly, now I give Batman a lot of shit for this, and you can call me a hypocrite. Like, Superman becomes so intrinsically tied to the universe because of just how awesome he is. Like, They even explain that he's been chosen by like some presence that no one knows of to be the totem of good and virtue of the world. And like, because Superman's just a guy, but he's so good
Yeah.
that like God has essentially said like he is special.
Yeah.
He will be the center point of everything forever because of how good he is. Now I give a lot of shit to Batman because of that, because Grant Morrison made him into like a god and like made Bat God. But that's a whole side tangent right there.
It's just, I keep reiterating how unnecessary that second part of the second chapter is. I think they could have had just as good as a story without it, you know, like, because like you said, once this chapter 3 or whatever starts, this is the story.
This is the
genuine
story. Yeah,
like
this is the
genuine
proper story.
Yeah, the first and second.
Do you feel as though if they had just taken out the second chapter in its entirety, like took everything out of chapter 2, do you think the story would be better for it, or do you think it would still be missing something?
The only thing I think would be missing is that moment, which is only like 3 pages, of Clark struggling with, I'm different from you, with Lana, and, you know, like the Pete stuff and everything like that. Like, that's the only thing I think really was needed.
And the crypto stuff.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, it's a cool moment. It's not important to the story though.
Yes, it's
I agree.
a cool moment, but I like, as far as required like for the story, I think that rejection of Lana and kind of his rejection and pushing away his good friend Pete is really the only thing you need from that second chapter.
Yeah.
Everything else could probably just
not be in the story.
Yeah, because I think the first issue chapter just covers pretty much everything you need to know as far as his background.
Yeah.
And then again, when he's full on Superman, you're not really asking yourself, man, how did he get so good at flying? How did he get so good at using his heat vision and things like that? And also, like, even if that question isn't answered, while you don't need him to be bad at being Superman, you can see him make miscalculations. You know, like, I'm going to use my heat vision to fuse this metal together and then realize just because I fused it together with my heat vision doesn't mean it is structurally sound.
Yeah.
And, you know,
what's funny is that there is a story from a long time ago where before they had retconned out the whole Superboy stuff, there was a story where Superboy actually created a lab for Lex Luthor. And while he was helping Lex with stuff, he actually used his powers and fucked up, and it caused a fire, which caused Lex to lose all his hair.
see, I as campy as that is, the result of
Would you have rather had that in
I
the
would have
story
I would have rather had something similar to that.
instead of the Legion?
Yeah.
I could see that. Yeah, I could agree with that.
It-
Well, I still enjoy the Legion stuff, but I do agree with you on that.
I'm not hating on it being in there per se. Just for me personally, it was not needed. Like, really, you could just throw the whole thing out and be perfectly okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that.
But if you enjoyed it,
Yeah, more power to you.
more power to you. Just,
Yeah.
it's okay to have a wrong opinion.
Well,
I'm busting your balls.
I know.
I just, again, I felt it was hugely unnecessary. But now I'm just beating a dead horse at that point.
Yeah. Well, thankfully you don't have to worry about that anymore, because now we're getting into the meat and potatoes
Yes.
of the story. In my opinion, where the story really just solidifies itself as a classic.
Yes.
So
agree.
we open with, again, a full page spread of Clark looking up to the skyscrapers of Metropolis. It's his first day. And Gary Frank really just knows how to capture a full page scene.
Yes.
He was really good at composition. He's really good at making your eyes travel all over the page. He gets there. Metropolis is very much Gotham too. when he gets there.
It's like sunny Gotham.
Yeah. Where Gotham is always in a perpetual state of overcast.
Yeah.
Metropolis, it's clear blue skies, but when you get down to the street level,
Yeah.
it is not great.
It's like the way I see it is it's like you have this golden city that is just kind of started to slowly get some dirt and grime on it, you know?
Yeah.
The people, I would say the people, while the city is like this technological achievement and things like that, I think the people cause it to be
They're
shit.
disillusioned.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's kind of cool because it's kind of a reflection of how people feel about the modern Superman stories, where you have a lot of people from our generation and millennials who do not like Superman because not only him as a character, but where he comes from, where he's based out of, is very like optimistic. It's very, everything's perfect there on a surface level.
Yeah.
And I feel like this chapter really shows you like, well, if it's not that way, this is what you're going to get. And that's not what you want because that's not what Metropolis is supposed to be. If you want Metropolis to be Gotham, then just read Batman.
Yeah. I
So
can see that.
And that's my personal opinion as well. If you want Superman to be dark and gritty, just read Batman.
I think obviously you need to have some form of conflict as like the people to give hope to. Like,
Right.
Otherwise, if they don't have any issues, they're not really looking for hope and stuff like that. But I would agree, like, going into this, I understood my taste for reading and understood this was not going to necessarily be my taste.
Yeah.
I understand that like Superman is an optimistic hero to its core.
So much so that it affects his city as well.
Exactly. And so like I think anyone going into a Superman story, now this is very much a generalization and broad statement, but if you are a person that goes into a Superman story trying to wish it to be edgy,
You're going to be disappointed.
you're going to be disappointed, and I think it's a fool's errand to want that out of this hero.
I agree.
That's why, like, as much as I'm not a Superman fan, I'm even tired of the whole Superman, what if Superman was evil archetype. Thank you, Injustice.
Yeah. Great series.
Yeah, great run, but man, the ripple effects after that is abysmal.
Because that movie had a direct effect on how David S. Goyer wrote Man of Steel as well. Not just narratively, but like visually.
Very mute colors.
Yeah. Obviously, Zack Snyder took a lot of inspiration from, his Watchmen movie that he made, because obviously Zack Snyder was the director, and he was inspired by the color palette of Injustice visually, while David S. Goyer was inspired narratively by the color palette. And you can really see it, but that's a whole another thing. I love Injustice. I don't want it to come off that I hate Injustice. I think Injustice is probably some of the best Elseworld stuff that we've gotten in recent years. And I'm very excited to cover all of it.
Yeah, I've never read a lot of DC, but Injustice is one of the things. I played the game and I was like, I want to read this comic run. And I read it and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But again, if it's good, it's good one time.
It's a good Elseworld story.
Yeah,
that's it.
But if it's good for the one time, but speaking of beating dead horses, but if every story after the fact is, what if Superman was evil? It gets old.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's an Elseworld, can't talk. It is an Elseworld story for a reason, because it is not the core values of this character.
Right. It's only interesting the one time.
Exactly.
So, all right, side tangent over. So Clark gets to Metropolis and he ends up bumping into this old lady, and she gives him the business. She's like, "You fucking idiot!
Yeah, you bumpkin.
Yeah, what are you doing? Why are you looking up into the sky?" And Clark's like, "Oh, it's so pretty." And she's like, "Well, okay, watch where you're going next time, idiot." And he keeps bumping into other people. He gets his coffee. He's People are yelling at him, and then he notices a crowd at this huge skyscraper building. It's essentially like the Trump Tower of Metropolis. And he asks one of the police officers, like, "Oh, hey, what's going on? Is there some type of event?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, you could say that." And he essentially explains to Clark that Lex Luthor, who is the most powerful man in Metropolis, holds basically like a lottery, the Luthor lottery. That's what they call it. He holds a lottery every single morning, and he picks one person out of the crowd, and he completely changes their life. Put that in quotes, changes.
Yes.
Because he definitely kills people with this lottery.
I mean, you can't have life problems if you don't have a life.
Right. Yes. And the officer's like, "Yeah, it's going to be starting any minute now. It starts at 10. And Clark's like, "Oh, shit. It's almost 10. He doesn't cuss. Superman doesn't cuss.
Yeah.
And he runs. Yeah. He runs to the Daily Planet, which is absolutely just trash. Like, it is run down. Everything is, like, broken. The planet globe on the top of the skyscraper doesn't even turn anymore. He gets there, and that's when we're introduced to a character named Rudy Jones.
Yeah.
Rudy Jones is one of the weirdest looking motherfuckers I have ever had the pleasure of looking at.
I would not want to run into him in a dark alley.
No, he looks fucking weird. And Gary Frank's depiction of him is hilarious. Yeah. I love it. Clark, being the nice guy that he is, he introduces himself. He's like, "Oh, I'm Clark Kent. I'm, reporter, blah, blah, blah." And Rudy Jones is like, "I'm Rudy Jones. I'm the janitor. I have no money."
Yeah, I'm broke. I'm hungry.
I'm hungry. And Clark's like, "Well, I have a lunch. I was going to eat it today, but you can have it." And he's like, "Oh, thanks." And he starts eating. And Clark's like, "It's only like 9." And he's like, "I forgot breakfast too."
Yeah. And Clark's like, "Well, it is the most important meal at the end of the elevator closes day."
Clark is just so goofy in this. But we are introduced to Rudy Jones, and don't worry, he does come back.
I don't think anyone was worried.
No.
But I think people didn't want him to come.
But he does end up becoming an iconic Superman villain.
Right.
So he ends up on the Daily Planet floor. Because I believe they established that most of the building is rented out because the Daily Planet's on its last leg.
Yeah. They are close to bankruptcy.
Correct.
Stated.
So he gets there and he's trying to get a hold of people. And he's like, "Hi, I'm Clark Kent. I'm
looking for...
Yeah, I'm looking for Perry. Yeah." And eventually he runs into, what is his name? He runs into Jimmy, obviously. Steve Lumbar, that's his name.
And Cat.
Yeah, Steve Lumbar and Cat, who are Superman characters. And Jimmy is the intern, and he gets their food, and Clark sees that he's about to drop everything, and he catches all of it, and he's like, "Oh, do you need help? You need help, Jim?" He calls him Jim. He doesn't call him Jimmy. Everyone fucks up his name.
Yeah.
In this, until he actually gets the first photo of Superman, and
and then he's like, "Put respect on."
Yeah, well earned respect. And he asks Jimmy for help. Jimmy thanks him. He's like, "Oh, I'm Clark Kent, reporter," and Jimmy's like, "Oh, I'm Jimmy Olsen," and Clark instantly says, "Oh, you're a photographer." And he's like, "How'd you know that?" He's like, you have a camera. On you." Yeah. He's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm an intern. It would pay the bills really well if I got paid at all."
Yeah. He's like...
And it gives me credit to my college if I went to college.
Yeah.
It's so sad. It's like the most sad thing I've heard about Jimmy Olsen. I do think at one point they become roommates. So really? Jimmy Olsen and Superman are roommates, but he doesn't know that Clark is Superman. Right. I think that was during like the 80s or 90s. I could be wrong on that though. So he asked Jimmy Olsen, where I'm looking for Perry White. Do you know where he is? And then you hear a woman yelling in the office, or in Perry White's office, and that's when we are introduced to Lois Lane, the once and future and always love of Clark Kent.
I really like Lois as a character.
I do too.
I was surprised how much that I liked her character. I thought super smart, hilarious writing for her. I like the fact that she is another aspect that rubs off on Superman as like the I'm never going to back down from finding the truth and doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I really like those aspects about her. I like the fact that she wasn't written as just the love interest, you know, like she's taken very seriously as a character, and I really like that about it.
I agree. I love when they use Lois Lane properly, because Lois Lane should never be a damsel in distress.
Yes.
She should be the one who's getting to the source of the problem, and Superman should be her backup. Like that's what it is. Lois should.
She
figure
gets
out the
herself
problem.
in trouble, and Superman is like,
He's not there to save her. She calls on him to end the problem.
Yeah.
Not because she's a damsel, but because she's like, I know what the problem is. Superman, get in there and figure it out. Because that's his wife.
come on, boy,
Yeah, that's his wife.
sick him.
Like the dog that you are. But no, I completely agree. I love it. I love it when Lois is depicted as a super independent person outside of Clark Kent / Superman.
Yeah.
Obviously, at this point, she doesn't know that he's Superman because they've never met. She does not find out that he's Superman until 1991, I believe.
Which again, I bring up the classic argument of Superman. How can you not tell? He's just wearing glasses and hunching his shoulders. That is all he's doing.
I don't know. You know what's funny is that the entire time Lois Lane is like, there is something up with you. You are weird.
Right. But I don't think for a moment she suspects you're Superman. Which again, I don't understand how. The man's built like a semi-truck. Like,
I think that's hilarious, by the way. Everyone makes fun of his suit and how it looks weird on him.
yeah. He's like 6 foot something.
Yeah.
Built like a freaking tank.
He's a shit brick house.
Yeah. And you're telling me, this new guy just showed up for work today.
And Superman
And
shows up.
Superman shows up. He's hanging around the Daily Planet. Like, I get it. It's comic books, but
Yeah.
it makes
like-
me laugh.
It's like, how do people not know that Bruce Wayne's fucking Batman?
or Peter Parker
Is Spider-Man,
Is Spider-Man. Like, how did it take MJ like so long to figure out that he's fucking Spider-Man?
Right. Like you would find that out.
Yeah. After maybe the second time, you'd be like, this is suspicious activity.
Yeah. So we get introduced to Lois, and it's this really cool moment where she is out for the truth. She really instills that, like, because Superman's classic slogan is truth, justice, and the American way, which I love that slogan. Obviously, I'm an American. You're an American. You know, our country has a lot of problems, just like any country does. But I understand what that's supposed to mean. Truth, justice, the American way.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily America's the best. It's supposed to embody the ideals of what America should be.
Well, it's like the, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness kind of thing.
Like Superman acknowledges that there are problems with not just America, but the planet as a whole. But truth, justice, and the American way represents that we can be the best versions of ourselves if only we try. And I love that about him. And she kind of instills that truth aspect of his slogan.
Right.
Because she is always in pursuit of the right thing, of figuring out what is the truth. I love that. She is lecturing Perry on Luthor because she is out to get that motherfucker.
Yeah, she knows he's like
Corrupt.
evil,
Yeah.
corrupt.
She is all about getting one on Lex Luthor because people have gone missing because of his little lottery thing. And, you know, he's bought out all the other news
And
outlets.
some of his inventions have killed people
caused
because of
deaths.
malfunctions or whatever.
And the only reason why it's being swept under the rug is because it's not happening in America. It's happening in other countries.
And I think maybe it's later, but I think she also reveals that he works with the government creating
Weapons.
Yeah, but
it's the same chapter, I believe.
yeah, it's called something else for like legal reasons.
yeah.
But she's like, it's weapons.
Yeah.
Like we're like
It's
stupid.
like it's supposed to be for like humanitarian stuff. And by humanitarian, they mean weapons for the government. So that way America can defend themselves. You know, that kind of bullshit. So she's arguing with him, yelling at him. Perry's like, I don't want to fucking hear it, bitch.
Yeah.
God damn. You were all about Lex Luthor all the time. And then, you know, Jimmy brings him their stuff. Lois thanks Jimmy. Fucking Perry gets the wrong name. I think he calls him like Jeremy or something like that. And then, Clark's like, Mr. White, hello.
Yeah.
I'm here. And Perry's like, oh, thank God you're here. And he introduces Clark to Lois and says like, oh, this is, our new reporter, Clark Kent. They shake hands. And, he calls her Miss Lane, and she says Lois is fine. And she's instantly like, this guy's a little odd.
Yeah.
And she gets the bright idea of like, I think I'm going to show Clark around the town, around the city. And Perry, being Perry, is like,
Believes it.
yeah, that's fine. You can do that.
Yeah.
After she just gave him this huge lecture, and then they rush out of his office, go straight to her desk. She is a slob. She has a lair. Let me tell you, her fucking desk is disgusting. She's going through her desk, finding a push-up bra, wig, sunglasses, and at the same time, a vase of flowers come. They're addressed to her from a man named John.
Yeah.
Who will become important.
Yep.
And
she just tosses
that shit. Clark's like, oh, those are so lovely. Like they'll really brighten up your desk. And she's like, yeah, no. Fucking throws them in the fucking trash can. They're gone. And she's like, I hate flowers. And they leave. And at the same time, or as they're leaving, they run into Rudy. And Rudy's like, Rudy asks Clark like, oh, how's your first day on the job? And Clark's like, it's great. I love it. It's so awesome, which is just so wholesome.
Yeah.
And Rudy's like, oh, I wish my day was going good. It's going awful. I forgot my bus pass at home, and so now I got to walk home, and by the time I get home, I need to walk back to work. And Clark's like, oh, well, all I have is like a 20 in my wallet, and he takes it, and he's like, thanks, this is really going to help me out. Fuck Rudy Jones.
Yeah. Fuck that guy.
Hashtag fuck Rudy Jones.
It's almost like he's a leech.
Or a parasite.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
So they get to
crazy.
They get to the gate of LexCorp, where they're about to show off this new exosuit that's going to help with labor production, quotes. Mm-hmm. And by labor production, it means weapons for the fucking military.
Yeah.
So they break in.
I'm going to read you my note for this part.
Yeah, go ahead.
I said, Lois says, yeah, to get over that fence. And Clark is at least a gentleman.
Yeah, Clark helps her get up, and her ass is just in his face, and he's looking away, and he's such a gentleman.
Yeah. Just.
And she's like, okay, I'm going to sneak in and watch the press release. You are going to go up to the front doors and, introduce yourself. And he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And he goes.
I love the fact that he's also like, why don't we just use the front door? And she's like, oh, we're not invited.
Yeah. He's like, well, isn't that breaking and entering? And she's like, what the fuck? Where are you from?
Yeah.
And I believe he says like, oh, I'm from Smallville. And she's like, that's where Lex Luthor's from.
Yeah.
Do you know Lex Luthor? And he's like, kinda.
Yeah.
But not really.
Yeah.
So he goes to the front door and he's like, Clark Kent, ace reporter, and he shows them his badge and it says the Daily Planet, and they fucking grab him, and he's like, oh, is there a problem? And they're like, yeah, you're not supposed to fucking be here, and they just toss
Yeah, she straight up used him as a freaking distraction.
I love it. Yeah. So she gets to the top, and that's when we are introduced to this exosuit called the Metallo suit, which is a classic Superman villain.
Even I knew that one.
Yeah. He's used in a lot of stuff. Surprisingly, I didn't know that, growing up. And then once I got into like high school, college, I was like, oh, Metallo's used in a lot of shit. He's like a really popular character. And Lex is, showing off the suit. And at that time, the security figures out that Lois Lane snuck in. They try to apprehend her, and she runs onto the stage. And at that same time, the Metallo suit is malfunctioning because I believe it picks up a helicopter, and then it malfunctions and it falls over, knocking both the helicopter and Lois off the skyscraper. She's falling, and she screams, "Help!" Clark hears it. He disappears because the guards are still trying to get him out of there. He disappears,
and we have a great full panel.
Oh. Dude, we have two great full panels almost back to back.
Yeah.
Where he sneaks into the alleyway. He does the Superman reveal.
Yep.
Oh my God. Gary Frank knocks it out of the park.
I will say that panel right there, is like, I was like, okay, like that is hype.
That's
Like
iconic.
it's so iconic, even as not a Superman fan. That is hype.
You can almost hear the music in the background
Yep.
when he when the orchestral instruments like build up when he reveals the S. It's just in my head. Again, I'm fanboying over this book, but
Yeah.
I just love it. So he reveals the S, he swoops on in, and then we get immediately another full
Of
page.
him holding Lois.
And all he says is, hi.
Yep.
It's so sweet. It is so awesome. Like, I know I'm a grown man in his mid 20s, but like, this is just such a sweet story.
Yeah.
I love it. It's very heartwarming because I don't get to read stories like this too often. Like, I love X-Men, I love Batman, I love Green Lantern, and those characters sometimes deal with really heavy shit.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a fan of Berserk, Vinland Saga, Blade of the Immortal, Vagabond. Those are some heavy series that deal with really heavy
Trust me,
topics.
I know exactly what you're talking
So
about.
getting to see just somebody be the best versions of themselves
Right.
is just very wholesome to me.
Positive vibe,
Yeah.
I'd say.
No, there's not a single moment in this book where I'm like just dreading the next chapter.
Yeah.
Like, I know at the end of the day, Superman is going to win.
I think it very much, as a character, is designed to just give you that warm feeling of like good will persevere over evil.
Right.
Which again, earlier, like I said, I think there's a place for that in comics, along with your edgy Batmans and like edgier stories and things like that.
I completely agree. He says hi to her, and then, she is instantly awestruck
Yeah.
by him. Like, she is,
For a multitude of reasons.
yeah, for a multitude of reasons. And she's like, oh my God, how are you up here right now? How are we up here?
Yeah. How are you flying?
And then she sees the helicopter and she warns him. And then with one hand, he just catches it. No effort whatsoever. And he gently glides back down, puts the helicopter down, puts her down. And she's like, who are you? And she's like, oh, or he says like, oh, are you all right? And like, he doesn't even care. Like, he doesn't care about anything. And when she asks like, who are you? He says, I'm just somebody who wants to help.
Yeah.
And then the entire city starts to crowd him and get in his personal bubble.
I like the fact that, I don't think this is the case. I like the fact that they stayed away from like her just being in love with Superman in that moment.
Yeah.
Because whenever she's like, her coworkers are like asking questions at the office, she's like almost annoyed at the fact that people are asking her questions about him. Like, she somehow knows all the answers.
You can definitely tell that her love for him grows over the course of the story.
Right. It's like, rather than her just being like, oh, I'm in love with this mysterious, air quotes.
Now, Clark is instantly in love with her.
For
the moment he
sure.
catches her.
Yeah. But like, rather than it being like, I'm in love, it's like my curiosity is piqued.
Right.
Like, I'm curious, not necessarily in a romantic way or anything, but I am curious about this flying individual.
Yeah.
I think a lot of like individuals might be like, oh, I'm going to just write this of like, this is their moment where the spark happens. When I think realistically, that doesn't necessarily happen that way. Like, you obviously have like people who might have like that dichotomy of like, I think I'm in love with this person because they saved me or whatever, which is a real thing that happens. And it turns out after a while that like those feelings aren't necessarily true because it's the sense of like that security that you got saved. But I can appreciate that they stayed away from that trope.
Yeah, I agree. So the crowd starts to crowd Superman. And he's like, hey, like, can you guys back up? I can't really breathe. You can definitely tell that he's obviously not used to this.
Yeah.
And he's feeling very self-conscious. And then people start to get afraid of him and they're like, don't touch him. Like, because this man just started flying out of nowhere. And the cops are like, hey, you need to come with us. You have some fucking questions to answer. Because obviously he's flying and he just caught a helicopter.
Yeah.
And then he's, he's frozen, and then he just flies away.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm out.
And he can hear with his super hearing, he can hear people talking about him after the day is done. People probably saw the news or read the paper or whatever, and they're like asking questions in a fearful way.
Yeah,
and I like the fact that it does shake his confidence.
it does, because he kind of says like, I think I made a mistake.
Yeah.
And that's coupled with a flashback where his parents are sitting on the porch with them. He's like fully grown. He's about to leave. And his dad says, you and your mother are 100% behind you. Like, we will support what you want to do. Just know that once you let the cat out of the bag, there's no putting it back. You have to deal with the consequences of your decision.
Can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Which I love that.
Yes.
Because, I'm going to make comparisons to Man of Steel again, where, Clark says, like, was I just supposed to let that bus full of children die? And Jonathan says, maybe, because the world will fear you when they find out who you are. The way the comic did it is handled so much better, because it's Jonathan still instilling that hope into Clark, while at the same time telling him to temper yourself.
Yeah.
Understand that not everyone's going to understand at first. And maybe some people will never understand.
And I can understand that criticism after this moment. I still, probably because of my edgy taste in media, I can still enjoy the Man of Steel version.
Okay.
But I can see very much that this version of this kind of like conversation in this book is much more in line with the core values of Superman.
Yeah.
So I can understand why people don't like it if you're a Superman fan. But at the same time, like, I also still enjoyed it.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, no, I understand that. Superman's confidence is shaken, and that is where we end chapter 3. Chapter 4, which is titled Parasites. I'm sure you can tell where that's leading. We open up I think it's the next day, and Rudy Jones and a bunch of other people are all at Lex Luthor's gates at LexCorp. They're all freaking the fuck out.
And I like that the fact that the chapter or the book part of this is called Parasites, and we're immediately greeted by all these individuals who are essentially parasites to Lex Luthor, because they just want to leech off him and give me the success. And
correct. They don't want to put in the work that it takes to be successful. They want the shortcut.
Yep.
Which, that's a huge aspect of Superman, where it's like, some could argue that he has a shortcut to greatness because of the gifts he's given. Others would argue that he's earned the powers that he has because of the untold amount of good that he's done for the world.
Yeah.
So
I would align with the latter on that one.
I agree. He's done so much good that he deserves the power that he has.
Well, it's also a matter, I think, of he's given these gifts, therefore the expectation of success is different from our version of success. Yeah, I'm sure Superman in our version of success could easily achieve that.
Oh yeah, 100%. He's one of the smartest men on the planet.
Yeah, like, he could have been a doctor and had X-ray vision and like succeeded beyond belief.
It's been said that he believes he has the ability to cure cancer. He doesn't, and he also has the ability to end like war, but he doesn't, because he doesn't believe that doing that will help humanity whatsoever, in the sense of humanity needs to earn that themselves.
Yeah.
If they continuously rely on him, then they will stop striving to be the best versions of themselves.
And they'll expect him to make them the best version.
Right, which is wrong. You shouldn't expect that. You should always want to improve yourself.
And his version of success is basically like Atlas, Greek mythology, holding the world up from its utter destruction.
Yeah.
Like, you worry about your success in obtaining, wealth or, curing cancer or whatever. My version of the success is that you get to be around to even attempt that.
Right.
So I think trying to be like he's given a shortcut to success invalid argument because his version of success it does not equate to the normal person's version of success.
His version of success is keeping Metropolis from being leveled by Doomsday.
Yeah.
That's his version of success.
Right.
Like, no human could even come close to doing that.
Yeah, a normal human is probably not looking at Doomsday and being like, I'll be successful when I defeat you.
Right. Because you know who did do that? The blue fucking beetle, and he ended up in a coma. That's what fucking happened.
Hey, I mean, he's got an alien backpack.
This was Ted Cord. This was the Blue Beetle before Jaime. He was just Batman, but blue.
Oh, okay.
He's just a guy.
So, what's the guy from One Punch Man? The bike guy.
Yes.
Something Rider. I can't remember his
I
name.
forget his name, but I know exactly who you're talking
Where
about.
he's standing up to the fish
Yeah, the
king
fish
or
king.
whatever and gets his ass beat.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That is, I cannot wait for us to cover Death of Superman because that is exactly what fucking happens. So we see Lex come out of his little penthouse looking thing. LexCorp is very weirdly designed, by the way. Not that that's a bad thing. It's just oddly designed.
And he comes out trying to like almost like portraying himself as God.
Yeah, because he says like, this isn't my way of sharing wealth. It's my way of saying thank you.
Yeah.
Like, he's trying to make it personal. Like, it's my personal goal to see Metropolis be the best version of itself because he wants it to be the way that he wants it to be.
Right.
We are also shown that Luthor's men, like security guards, handpick the people who are, chosen for the lottery for reasons that Lois believes is.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, it's like they pick out the people like no one's gonna miss this one.
Essentially, yes. So he picks out Rudy, and because they notice that he's wearing his Daily Planet badge.
Yeah,
and that's when Lex is like, "Oh, okay,
time to fuck them over some more."
He takes him. He's essentially saying like, "Oh, my best." People will get you on track to getting a college education at the best college and, doing a dietary plan, all that kind of stuff because he's fucking overweight.
Yeah.
And, he's like, Rudy's like, I've never been much for school. Can you just like roll all of that into money and I can just spend it however I want? Again, that shortcut to success type deal. And he essentially is informed that newspapers are starting to talk about the Flying Man. Mm-hmm. And he essentially is like, he's like, God damn it, who's writing or who is perpetrating this story? And they tell him like Lois Lane.
Yeah.
Because she's obviously an ace reporter, journalist, all that kind of stuff. And she's like, Lex is like, I want a meeting with Lois Lane.
Yeah. And also at one moment he's like, how is he flying? It's got to be one of my competitors.
Oh, yes. Yeah. He says it's either a competitor or someone who broke in and stole one of their jetpacks.
Yeah.
And they're essentially like, no, like we have no proof of that. Yeah. All of our stuff is here. Like,
they're like, unless they broke in again and like put it back,
yeah,
all our stuff is accounted for.
Right. And then we get to that scene that you mentioned earlier where everyone's kind of crowding around her and they're like, so the Superman caught you. What's he like? Blah, blah, blah. I don't think he has the name Superman at this point.
No.
I think she gives him the name Superman.
When she writes her first.
Yeah. When she writes the first actual article. Yeah. And at this point, Lois is like, I'm trying to write something that's hopeful for the city. And Perry's like caught off guard and he's like, what the fuck? You're writing something hopeful? And she's like, well, I'm trying.
Yeah, like, and also Lex at this point is like, I'm gonna defame, like, I'm gonna try and defame the shit out of him.
Yeah, Lex Luthor, yeah.
Yeah.
And then one of Lex's men, or a couple of them, come into the planet and ask for Lois Lane and Clark Kent because he was also there when it happened. And they take him to LexCorp. While all this is happening, we're seeing all this stuff with Rudy Jones where he's like, oh, are all these donuts free? And he takes like a fuck ton of donuts. And that's going to be important. It's going to be important later. And that's where we get the scene where he's like, oh, just bankroll all that money into or bankroll all that stuff that you would have given me into money and I'll spend it the way I want. Lois and Clark show up. Clark's like, wow, you can see the city from here. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful view. And Lois is like, it's a beautiful view because he stole all the fucking money from the city. And she is like not about it.
Yeah,
like,
she hates Lex with a passion.
Yeah. And then Lex shows up and he essentially just he interrogates them regarding the flying man, and he drops a little like, your father says hello.
Yeah.
Kind of hinting that her father and Lex are not necessarily friends, but like
they are business partners.
Something. And they reveal it later, yeah. He has them both sit down. Clark introduces himself and he's like, "Oh, hey, Mr. Luther, I'm Clark Kent. We actually knew each other in Smallville." And he's like, "Yeah, I remember you. It was ages ago." They start talking about the mysterious hero who saves lives, and basically he's saying like, if you don't stop reporting on this guy, I will charge you with trespassing.
Yeah.
Like I will make sure the planet is ruined.
And Lois is pretty much like, fuck you.
Yeah. She basically diverts the conversation to all the controversies that he's had and starts, just giving him the fourth degree. Just starts throwing shit out. We see Rudy drops one of his donuts that lands in a chemical.
Yeah.
that LexCorp employees are hauling around. And he grabs the donut and he's like, 5-second rule. And he takes a fucking bite of it and he immediately transforms into Parasite.
Into Grimace.
Into the Grimace. And it is horrifying. His transformation is really fucking disgusting. He ends up grabbing one of the employees and sucks the fucking life force out of him. Mm-hmm. And Clark hears someone yell, "Help." And he gets up and, Lois is like, "Hey, I'm on a roll here. Like I'm giving this dude the business." And he's essentially like, "This is a one-sided conversation. He'll never give you the answers that you want. He's always going to cover it up using money or some type of political action. We need to go because this is a waste of time." And both Lex and Lois are like, "Are you serious?"
Yeah, surprised Pikachu meme.
Yeah.
Like
they say, "Are you for real?" Both at the same time.
Yeah, well, also after that whole moment, he's like, "But before we go, can I use your bathroom?"
He's like, "I have a real tummy ache."
And they're like, "What the?"
And then a security guard busts into the room and, he says like, "Oh, we have a situation here." And as he says that, the wall fucking explodes.
Yep.
And then we get the full reveal of the Parasite, which is just a disgusting looking character in this rendition.
Human leech.
Yeah. Like, and I appreciate the design a lot. I do like that it is grotesque. Clark disappears. And then the moment Lois is like, "Clark," we see Superman fucking crash into the Parasite.
When Clark disappears, isn't it Lois looks to her left and there's a massive hole there?
No, what it is she looks to her left because Clark landed to her left.
Yeah.
She sees that he's not there. Parasite goes to grab her, and then Superman comes down from above and crashes a hole through the floor because they're on like the like almost top floor, and he just crashes them through the entire skyscraper all the way outside. He's even like, "Let's take this outside." They crash through in this cool like full panel or full page panel. They crash through the LexCorp gates. The Parasite starts to leech the power from Superman. And then, he's like, "Didn't your mother ever teach you not to bite people?" And then he punches Rudy right into a light pole. And then the fight basically ends with Superman shooting his heat vision at the Parasite, blowing up the car, and then using his ice breath to incapacitate Parasite. And he's like,
which I will say the panel where after he shoots his heat vision and it like explodes, where he's just like standing there in the like cape.
Yeah.
I will say that's really cool.
Yeah, it's very
I was like, okay, he's chill like that.
Yeah, it's very badass. I agree. It shows that like Superman is a careful, loving person, but when the time arises, he can be serious if need be. But he freezes Rudy so that way the cops can arrest him. And he says, "Everyone keep your distance. Don't get close to him. Let the police deal with this." Lex shows up. There are people saying like, "Don't get any," or "Don't get any closer. We don't want to be hurt." And Superman's instantly like, I'm not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
Like that's not what I'm here for. And a citizen says like, "Oh my God, it's a miracle." And then Lex says, "Miracles don't exist."
Yeah. Which is callback.
Yeah. He instantly calls out Superman. And he says, like, what are you doing here? Like, you come in like an angel from heaven above, and you talk about saving us and protecting us, but how do we not know you're actually, a psychopath criminal who's gonna, take over our city? And even at that point, are you even human?
Yeah.
And you can tell that really pisses Clark off. And
Because he's also trying to stand there and explain himself.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to help.
yeah,
That's all I want to do.
yeah, he says, like, I'm here to help people. That's my power.
But Lex just is laying into him.
Yep. And then, just like you mentioned earlier, where Superman could hear people talking about him, he hears people agreeing with Lex, saying like, "Oh, maybe he was right. Did you see how he looked after he said that?" He goes back to the planet. He's basically rethinking his decisions, and then he sees Jimmy. He thinks he's about to jump off the fucking skyscraper. And he's like, "Oh my god, don't jump, asshole!" Jimmy's like, "What are you talking about? Are you crazy?" And then he notices that it's Superman, and he's like, "Oh shit!" He's like, "Oh, I wasn't going to jump. I like to come out here and think. And I wanted to do it one last time before I go back home."
Yeah.
And Superman's like, "You're going home? Why is that?" And he's like, "Because I'm a failure.
Yeah, it's not working out here.
I can't make it as a photographer. My parents are right. Like
they told me I couldn't make it, and they were right. Yeah.
And Jimmy asked, like, "What did your parents say when you first came here?" And we get a really sweet panel of Clark hugging his mom, and he says, "I'll try to make you guys proud." And his dad says, "You already do."
Yeah.
And it's God, it is so nice. And I like to think that he told that to Jimmy, and Jimmy went, "Thanks, asshole. That really made me feel better."
Yeah, but I don't see. I took it as he doesn't.
No,
because
I
he
agree.
didn't want to
Make him feel
worse.
worse. Yeah. And he essentially tells Jimmy, like, "I was thinking about going back home too. I don't think I can cut it as a hero. And maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'm just not suited for it." And Jimmy tells him, like, if someone with your powers is saying that he can't make it, what choice or what chance do I have?
Yeah.
And that kind of makes Superman like think a little bit. And he says, I'm still pretty new to Metropolis. I would really hate for my only friend to leave.
Yeah.
Which is just an awesome moment. And he starts to fly away. And then Jimmy's like, "Do you think it would be too much for me to ask you for a picture?" And Superman says, "I'm trying to kind of avoid that, especially right now with the whole Lex thing." And he says, like, "It would really help me out." So you can see Superman thinks about it, and he says, "Okay, why not?" And we get this really fucking funny picture of Superman like hiding a boner.
Yeah.
His hands are like crossed over his crotch, and Jimmy's like, "Dude, you look fucking weird.
Yeah. Put your hands on your hips.
You look like you shouldn't be allowed within 20 miles of a school right now." And he's like, "Why don't you," like you said, "why don't you put your hands on your hips?" And he's like, this feels really weird. Like, this does not feel natural. And Jimmy's like, "This is perfect." And he takes a picture. We cut to Perry White and Lois Lane talking. Lois Lane has typed up the entire article of Superman, the savior of Metropolis. And Perry's like, "This is great, but it's going to give us so much shit with Luthor." And she's like, "I don't care. I'm going to run it anyways." He's like, "Okay, well, if you're going to run it, that's on you.
It's been a pleasure working with you."
Yeah, but you don't have a picture." And then Jimmy rolls in. He throws down this really awesome black and white picture of Superman. And he says, Jimmy Olsen, ace photographer.
Yeah.
And it is really cool because Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen from this point on will always be a team.
And Lois literally says, "Well, looks like you just found your newest dream team."
Yep. It's really awesome. We see Luthor look through all the different Metropolis papers, and then he sees his smile slowly starts to turn to a grimace and then anger, and he sees the Daily Planet, and it says, "Meet the city's new saviors."
Yeah, because all the other newspapers, he's an alien. He don't trust him, and then you have the planet that's like the savior.
Yep. And Lex Luthor basically says, like, "This means war," like on the Daily Planet.
Yep.
And that's the end of, I believe, chapter
4.
Was that chapter 4?
Yeah, that was chapter 4.
Wow, man, that flew by.
Yeah, we got 2 more.
Yep, 2 more. Chapter 5, which is Strange Visitor.
Yep.
Opens up with a fire happening in downtown Metropolis. the firefighters are trying to get as many people out as possible, but it's just spreading too fast.
Supermaning.
Oh yeah, Superman rolls in, saves the firefighter and a citizen, and then instantly gets all the people out of the building. No one dies.
Yeah.
And, at first they're like, one of the guys is like, look out, he's going to fucking kill us. And then another person's like, he saved us. What are you talking about?
If he wanted us to die, he would have just let us burn.
Yeah. And then people are trying to get pictures of him, but he's moving too fast.
Yeah.
And then he lands, not in an alleyway, but like just in the distance, he lands off in like a quiet part of the city, and Jimmy's all like catches up to him, and he's like, oh, hey Jim, how you doing? And Jimmy's like, oh, I'm doing good. Do you think I could get a picture of you real quick for this week's article? And he's like, yeah, of course. And he starts looking around at like what he can do to make the picture look interesting.
He
picks up a car, and it's this really cool image. It's kind of like an homage to the first Action Comics cover where Superman's holding that car, like throwing it or whatever. It's pretty cool. Lois is there, and he's like, oh, Miss Lane, it's good to meet you again. And or it's good to see you again. And she's like, she essentially says like, it's funny how we keep running into each other.
Yeah, you can see the flirtation happening.
Yeah. And Jimmy's there being the third wheel, being the innocent.
Like, can I should I leave?
Yeah.
Like,
he is totally clueless. He's like, I'm Superman's #1 fan.
Yeah.
So they're talking about, stuff that's going on. They essentially say like that fire wasn't an accident. And it's kind of this mystery going on with what's going on in the city right now. They don't necessarily touch upon it too much because it instantly pivots to like the military.
Yeah.
I will say that's like the one thing, that I'm kind of not too sure on.
I think it might be something that's like they're trying to be like, not everything is as it seems in the city. Like, I don't know the villains so much. Maybe it's like a secret kind of like hint to a future villain.
Now they do say that a lot of the fire was at one of the distribution places of the Daily Planet.
Oh, right.
Because I believe that's supposed to be what Luthor meant by
like,
this.
This is war. Yeah, they because he's like Superman's like, yeah, it didn't seem like an accident because with my molecular vision, I could see gasoline.
Yeah.
And what is gasoline doing across a loading bay dock?
Right.
Or something like that.
Right.
And yeah. It's basically Lex's war on Daily
which
Planet.
doesn't last long.
No.
Because he instantly sees Superman, rescues
And
firemen,
it just helps him even more.
Yeah, it's total backfire. It's like the Barbra Streisand effect, where he's trying to fucking have one thing happen, and the complete opposite fucking happens.
And that's why I think he pivots to the military on this.
Yeah, because at that point we see Luthor having a conversation, looking out at the crowd of people, waiting for the lottery to happen, and that's when it's revealed that General Lane is working with Luthor.
Yeah. And in this moment, Lex is like, he's kind of given this spiel about, how Superman's got to drop this savior charade at some point. He's not a god. He wants something. And it's all just straight projection.
Yeah.
Like, because Lex's whole thing with this lottery is he presents himself as this savior figure.
Yeah.
But he's got ulterior motives. And he's like, well, since I had ulterior motives, he obviously has them too. Right. I'm so smart. He's basically thinking himself into a lie.
Right.
Because he thinks he's so clever.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that assessment. So he is talking to General Lane, and he's essentially like, yeah, Superman's a threat to national security. And he's like, we don't have a way to stop him though.
Yeah.
Like from what all of my men say, he's basically a god. And Luthor, it's kind of hand wavy the way they explain it. Luthor takes him to this secret laboratory that's in his office and essentially reveals kryptonite to him.
Yeah.
And he says like, this rock gives off radiation, and that radiation will affect Superman, and he believes that the rock came from Superman's homeworld. How he comes to that conclusion, I don't necessarily remember.
They explain that the chemical that the donut, that parasite, ate
That's right. That gave him his powers.
came from the radiation of this rock.
And Parasite hurt Superman.
Exactly.
Okay, you are completely right. Yep, I forgot about that. So there we go. We fixed that. And
come on, fake fan.
Yeah, I
you're
know,
supposed to know these things. Come on now.
Yeah, I know, right? I only read this story 2 weeks ago. So he takes him, shows him that. We get a scene of the Daily Planet. Lois is there.
Yep.
And then her ex-boyfriend. I wouldn't even
Not even an ex. Fuck this guy. That's all I have in my notes is fuck John Corbin. Fuck him.
John Corbin introduces himself. John Corbin, of course, if you know anything about Superman, is Metallo.
Yep.
He is the supervillain Metallo.
He's got little dick energy.
Yep. He shows up. He starts telling Lois, you should quit this reporter business.
Your dad's right. We should get married and you should have kids and stop all this crazy nonsense.
You're not getting any younger.
Yeah.
That kind of shit. And she basically dismisses him and she says, I'm busy, go away. And he grabs her. This is in fucking public, by the way.
Yeah.
He grabs her and he says, don't dismiss me. And she says, you're hurting me. And then Clark grabs his shoulder, John's shoulder, and says, I hope I'm not interrupting anything, but me and Lois Lane are supposed to have lunch today, so we need to get on that, or else we're going to be late. And John Corbin's like, who are you? And he's like, hi, I'm Clark Kent. And he goes to shake his hand, and then he tries to squeeze Clark's hand and hurt him. You see that Clark is not.
And then he responds in kind.
He barely moves his hand, and it hurts. You can see
doesn't break his hand, but it fucking hurts.
No. And Clark says, I hope you have a pleasant stay in Metropolis. Essentially saying, get fucked.
And John walks away, and he's like, I think he says something like, I'll let your dad says hello or something like that.
Yeah, your dad says hello.
And he walks away, and then Clark's like, so do you want to have lunch?
Yeah. He's like, you want to have lunch? And she's like, you're on Smallville.
Yeah.
And they go out.
Nice little wholesome panel of them walking together, arm in arm.
Yep. They're at lunch. The Metallo, General Lane gets introduced to the Metallo, project. We see a new version of the Metallo suit, probably the one that Luthor was actually going to give the military. And essentially says, it's basically done. It just needs a pilot. And then John Corbin says, I'll be the pilot.
Yeah.
Essentially, fuck Superman. And Lois and Clark are at lunch. They're just, eating, having a good old time. And Lois is like, I don't understand you. You are so weird. And she's like, I like to think that I'm special, that kind of deal.
And she even says, eyes tell the story. And your eyes tell me that you want to be underestimated, and I can't figure out why.
Yeah, somehow she doesn't fucking put two and two together.
That's what I'm saying. It's glasses and a slouch.
So they're having this lunch.
I don't get it.
They're having this lunch, and then Superman accidentally knocks, his food and glass of water or fucking milk. I don't know what the hell he's drinking. He knocks it over. And he's like, oh my gosh. And he starts cleaning it up. He says he's sorry. And then he hears an explosion. And he's like, I've got an inner ear infection. It's making me really dizzy. I gotta go.
It's a callback to one of with Lana when she's like, you're bad at lying. Yeah. And he's like, should I have told her I have an inner ear infection? I'm feeling dizzy.
Keep working on it, bud.
Yeah.
He leaves. He goes to the source of the explosion. It turns out to just be like a machine, like a military item.
Yeah.
And then General Lane meets him there, and he says, "Hey, sorry to call you out here in the blue, but my men said that you usually only respond to disasters or accidents, that kind of stuff. I'd like to have a conversation with you." And
Superman obliges.
Like, of course, sir. Yeah, I'll have a conversation. Starts talking to him. He's like, "Oh, where are you from? We understand that you're not exactly human." This is the kind of the first reference we get to the JSA, because Lane even says there have been numerous reports of people with fantastic powers back in World War II, kind of hinting that the JSA was around, because that's when the JSA was active. They disappeared, but it's also kind of implying that it's only a rumor.
Yeah.
Kind of they only appeared during World War II, and they tried their hardest to make themselves not be known, kind of working in the shadows, which is cool, but also like how, because you have characters like Dr. Fate, Hawkman,
Yeah.
Atom Smasher. Atom Smasher is essentially just Giant Man from Marvel.
Atom Smasher, where's Johnny Silverhand when you
Yeah,
need?
yeah, I know, right? Topical cyberpunk reference right there.
Love Cyberpunk.
Yeah. And then Clark says, like, well, I might not be from here, but, you know, I grew up here. I have human parents. I'm just like everybody else. And Lane's like, yeah, sure. What do you want from us? And Clark is essentially like, I don't want anything. I just want to help people because that's what I was raised to believe. And I'm going to keep doing that.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Giving very straight, honest answers.
Yeah. And General Lane is essentially like, well, I see that you have a rapport with my daughter, Lois. And he says, like, what would an alien want to do with my daughter? And Superman's essentially like, this feels like an interrogation.
Yeah.
He says, because it is an
And
interrogation.
immediately Clark's like, okay, this conversation's over with.
He says, I'm not comfortable with this. I need to go. And then General Lane's like, if you walk out that door, you will be an enemy of the United States. And all Superman does is he turns, looks at him, and then he says, I'm nobody's enemy, General. Which is really cool because, like, that is true. Superman does not make enemies. He doesn't hold grudges. He doesn't care about that.
He's just trying to do the right thing.
Right.
And there's certain people who are not okay with
Yeah.
that.
And if you get in his way of doing the right thing, he will make sure you are stopped.
Yeah.
So he leaves, and the military just instantly starts just unloading on him, trying to shoot his ass. He's
Obviously
not working.
not working.
He incapacitates them without hurting them, and then Metallo shows up, or John Corbin, because at this point he's not Metallo yet. He's
and
still
he's
John
got
Corbin.
that giant mech suit.
Yeah, and he beats the shit out of Superman.
Yeah.
He beats him up. It's kind of even actually, where like he gets good hits in on Superman, but Superman like damages the machine.
Yeah. My question is, what is with DC and the government trying to hunt their heroes?
That's a really good question.
Like, I don't.
It's specifically Superman. Like, they really do not like Superman because he is an alien that has godlike powers.
Well, I mean, because like then you have Batman hunted by. Well, I understand why Gotham PD hunted him, but
Right.
it's like they all seem to be hunted by like some kind of federal or like government entity at some point.
I think it also has to do with events that happen around the same time as well, because the government does not trust Superman and superheroes after the events of Identity Crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Identity Crisis is a storyline. It is a crisis, but it doesn't deal with like rebooting the series. It just revamps some things. It deals with the idea of how does being a superhero affect the people closest to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it is found out that through some things that happened, the superheroes abused their powers and used their powers to manipulate and erase the memories of a supervillain.
Oh wow.
Batman was not okay with that when he found out, and so they chose to mind wipe him as well.
Jeez.
Batman found out, freaked the fuck out, and then created Brother Eye, which is a government-sanctioned satellite that tracks all metahumans and records all of their powers.
That's like some Cerebro shit.
That's kind of where it's not exactly where it comes from, but it's kind of where people get that idea of Batman has a contingency for everybody because he uses Brother Eye with the government to watch everyone.
Yeah.
And then the government abuses Brother Eye and then turns it into the OMAC project, which hunts down superheroes and makes them into basically lobotomized slaves. Because metahumans have gone rampant and keep fucking shit up. And at that point, during Infinite Crisis, which happens right after the OMAC project, supervillains are all over the world causing havoc and chaos. And like governments are like, we can't handle this anymore.
Yeah.
Like the Joker has gotten out like
A
a
million.
million times, and he's killed so many people that like we don't have room to bury any more people. That kind of shit.
Wow.
So that's kind of where that comes from. Obviously, there are stuff that happens before that also affects how people view superheroes, like Tower of Babel, which is another story about contingency Batman. That's actually where that comes from, where Ra's al Ghul breaks into the Batcave and gets
That data.
that
and starts
data.
Using it.
Yep, that's where we get stuff like the red kryptonite. We get the Flash having seizures at light speed.
The animated
Justice League Doom.
Yeah, I was gonna say the
With
animated
Vandal Savage.
movie does similar.
Yeah, that movie's inspired by Tower of Babel.
Yeah,
Obviously, they changed a few things in there, but yeah, that's where that comes from. So during their fight, John Corbin opens up his mech chest, the chest of the mech suit, and reveals the kryptonite heart, which fucks Superman up. It starts to weaken him, and he's still getting shot at by normal soldiers.
but
it's not penetrating him, but it's starting to make him bleed.
Yeah.
It's still bouncing off of him, but not enough to really cause any serious damage. He puts his hand out, blocks some bullets, and then one bullet gets through, hits Superman in the forehead, and then hits the kryptonite heart, causing the suit to explode.
really fucking up John Corbin.
Yeah, he's basically dead.
Yeah.
And then Superman crashes out of there. He's like, he sees what happens to Corbin, and he's like, oh my God, you need to get this man medical attention. And then he just flies out of there because he's all kinds of fucked up too. At the Daily Planet, General Lane's men come in, start taking everything that has to do with Superman or just has to do with reporting in general away.
He's basically like, you're shut down.
Yeah.
Government, by the president, you are shut down, no longer able to operate.
And he's General Lane is there, and he specifically calls out his daughter, and he says, like, your boyfriend is an enemy of the state, and we will hunt him down and kill him.
Yeah.
And that's basically the last panel is Superman hiding in the sewers of Metropolis, and that's where chapter 5 ends.
And now we're in the last.
Yeah, the last chapter, and man, this cover of Superman breaking out of the kryptonite is just so fucking cool.
It's very good. I for the most part, this beginning section, I'd say, like, in my notes, it's like you have some good action of, you know, Superman being like hunted and stuff, and him like running from the government and stuff like that. And then you have like Lois still interacting with her dad, being like, you can't fucking do this.
Yeah, he's a person.
Yeah,
like he has rights.
He's here to help. Yeah. And her dad's just like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I could give less of a fuck
yeah.
about Superman's rights. Chapter 6 opens with Lane giving her father the business, like you just said, telling him he can't do any of this. And General Lane's essentially like, I'm a general for the government. I can do whatever I want. And what I want is for you to give me your shit.
And this is all signed off by the president.
Yep. And that's when Lane reveals, like, did he ever tell any of you that he's an alien? And you can see that the Daily Planet's like shocked.
Yeah.
But to me, that's not a huge reveal. Personally, like, I would not care at that point. I'm like, who gives a fuck if he's an alien?
I think it shocks less because I think in their minds, it'd be more believable for a human to have just acquired
power or technology
or something, rather than, oh, there's life out there.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
I could see that.
Alien.
Yeah, I guess I could see that. Just by the things that he can do, my first thought would be like, oh, he's an alien. That or he's like a supernatural being.
Yeah, like, obviously our brains have the benefit of having stories like this and stuff.
Right.
But I think, like, obviously in universe, it would be easier to assume that, like, they're just special. Mm-hmm. Or, again, like you said, technology or something. I mean, that was Lex's first thought, was it was technology.
Right.
To have it be an alien, I think shattered some worldviews.
Maybe, yeah, because then you have people who are like, oh, well, does God actually exist? That kind of stuff. Spoiler alert, he does. He's called the Presence. So when that truth bomb is dropped, we get this page of Lex working at a medical table on John Corbin, because I kind of glossed over or skipped it in the last chapter. General Lane asks Lex Luthor if he can save him, because apparently Lex Luthor has like a PhD in like actual medical practices, and Lex is like, yeah, sure, I can save him. I think what he does is he just infuses technology into Corbin, because Corbin is basically like a walking dead man.
He basically makes a cyborg.
Yeah, essentially. And then we get this really cheesy / goofy, funny moment of
He's alive.
yeah, he's doing the Frankenstein.
Yeah.
He's alive.
And he's even got that look on his face.
Yeah. The military soldiers have gone into the sewer hunting down Superman. They find him. He's sick.
They're still shooting.
Yeah, they're still shooting at him. He busts through, and we get this fucking crazy full page just panel of Superman. He's lifting up a tank, and it's Superman that's like mostly covered in shadow, which is from my point of view, it's kind of trying to imply that Superman is done holding back. He is serious, and he basically destroys the tank. He doesn't kill anyone. Like obviously, Superman has a no-kill rule.
He takes off like the tracks.
Yeah, and he starts like whipping people with it.
Which I think would still possibly kill us. Well,
he's holding back.
I think he's whipping the weapons out of their hands and stuff like that.
I'm looking at this panel. He is straight up hitting them.
Well, I mean,
he does say like, stop. There are hundreds of people in those buildings. Like they're trying to show like, oh, well, he's not hitting them that hard.
Yeah.
He's just telling them to stop.
He's just giving a little pat.
Yeah, he's only breaking both their legs and making sure that they can't
several
walk.
ribs.
Yeah.
And they might die from like a brain contusion or something like that.
And then Lois, because we jump around a lot in this comic because there are, a couple storylines happening at the same time. They all converge. Lois essentially tells her dad it doesn't matter that he's an alien.
Yeah.
He came to this planet. He was raised here. He came to our city, and he has done nothing but help us. What right do you have to say anything different? And essentially, General Lane reveals like, well, it doesn't matter what you think because we found a way to hurt him, and we're going to use it.
And he's going to die.
He's going to die. And he says like, from our point of view, the war is already won, essentially. And we get this really funny panel where they are arguing, and then everyone looks outside, and you see like the tank turret just flying in the distance. Like Superman just threw it. I'm like, that probably landed on somebody. Superman.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
No, with his supervision, he can see.
He can spot. With his super brain, he can tell. He can calculate the distance. It'll land in the water.
This mother and her child, they're walking at 0.056 miles per hour, and I'm going to throw this tank at 1 mile per hour.
Yeah, and it'll land before they get anywhere near it. Yeah. It'll scare them, but they won't get hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
So the daily it's fucking us justifying Superman's fucking actions.
No, it's me making fun. You justify.
I'm just saying Superman doesn't kill. Everything he does has purpose.
It's because God's looking out. The presence is looking out.
Yeah.
That's why.
So the Daily Planet essentially devises a plan to get Jimmy and Lois out of the building so they can go help Superman, like go warn him. Mm-hmm. And, they trick Lane, they blind the soldiers, Lois and Jimmy get out of there. Superman does everything in his power to pacify soldiers, like freezing their guns, all that kind of stuff. And then he gets hit by a car and sent through a phone booth. And that's when we are introduced to Metallo.
The genuine.
Yeah, version. Frankenstein Metallo. I will say, Metallo does not always look like this.
Oh, yeah?
Because he looks like a person in this. In Justice League Doom, he's actually in that movie.
Yeah.
In most stories, he's basically like a Terminator.
Yeah.
Like he's a Terminator with a brain, essentially. That's all it is.
I was going to say, I think in Justice, he's in that for a minute, and it's that same way where he's just a Terminator.
Yeah.
And has a brain.
Yeah. So he starts whooping the shit out of Superman, and it's a cool ass fight because he gets Superman on the ground, and then he jumps up and fucking crushes Superman through the ground, and
kind of beating the shit out of him.
Yeah, he says, "Come on, Big Blue, stand up," and then you just see Superman ball his fist, and he says, "Sit down," and then he punches Metallo through like an ATV and then a fucking tank, and it's pretty fucking cool. And then some of the soldiers are saying like, "Hey, Sergeant Corbin, Sergeant Corbin, are you okay?" And he basically says like, "Shut the fuck up. This is my fight." And he like starts attacking his men, and that makes Superman like, it pisses him off.
Yeah.
It's like, those are your guys. Like, they're supposed to help you.
And Lois shows up.
Yeah, Lois shows up and she grabs Superman's hand and she tells him to leave. And Superman's like, "You want me to leave?" And she says, "I don't want you to. They're going to kill you and they will not stop until they do." And then he's like, "Why are they trying to kill me?" And she's like, "Because they're afraid. People are afraid of things that they don't understand." And Metallo says, like, "You are a monster. We're in the right. The government is in the right." And Superman is essentially like, "I'm not going to stop. I'm just going to keep fighting."
Yeah.
He goes, he clashes.
If they kill me, they kill me.
Yeah, if they kill me, they kill me. And, Corbin even asked him, like, "Didn't you hear her? She told you to leave." And he says, like, "Why won't you?" And Superman punches the mask off. And he says, "Because I'll never give up," which is awesome. I love that tagline. Whenever Superman says that, it's like, it like invigorates me. Even if the story shows that the heroes are at their lowest, when Superman says, "I'll never give up," it's like they're going to win.
And Lois realizes it's Corbin. And she's like, "Oh my God, John?"
Yeah, because they haven't told them that it's
that
it's John yet. And she calls him a monster. And then he's like,
he gets pissed.
"Oh, I'm a monster." And the U.S. soldiers are trying to get him to stop because he's going to kill her. And he shoots a kryptonite beam at her. Superman jumps in the way. He's fucked up. He's on his last leg. And then he uses his X-ray vision to see that he still has lungs. Mm-hmm. The only thing that's really replaced about him, besides like his skeleton,
is his heart.
And so he's like, "There's one way I know how to stop him." He takes a sewer grate, melts it onto his chest, and then takes him up to, the basically like the upper atmosphere.
Yeah.
He doesn't kill him.
No.
He just makes him pass out. General Lane is scolding her, and Lois is like, "I want you out of my life after this. Like, you've done enough, pain and hurt for a lifetime." Superman drops Metallo on the ground. General Lane's like, "What did you do to him?" And he says, "I told him to take a nap." And, General Lane tells one of the soldiers, like, "Arrest both of them." And the soldier's like, "Superman fucking saved our lives from Metallo or John.
He was going to kill us."
Yeah. And then we essentially get the Spider-Man 1 scene
Yeah.
where the citizens like start throwing shit at General Lane, and the soldiers is like, you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us.
Yeah.
He's our savior. And, you know, they're starting to fucking gang up on the soldiers. And then Superman lands in between them and he says, everybody stop. Stop what you're doing. This will get us nowhere. And the citizens are like, but you saved us. Like, what are we supposed to do? Like, if you don't want us to protect you, what do you want us to do? And he says, I want you to stop looking for a savior. Lex Luthor is not your savior. I am not your savior.
You are.
You are your own savior. I was given incredible gifts, but so are you. And it's up to every single one of us to use those gifts to prop each other up and to show everyone that this city can be more than what they think it is.
Which is just a great message in general.
Yes, like community.
Yeah.
You know, banding together under a common cause of good. I love that. We don't have a lot of that in modern day.
And just also being your own champion.
Yeah.
Like striving for your goal and things like that. It's just a good message in general, which I can appreciate.
Yeah. I completely agree. And he says, like, and that's essentially all I have to say, almost. And then he leaves. And we cut to LexCorp Tower where Lex Luthor is like, what do you mean General Lane's not taking any of my calls? You better, fucking get him on this phone or I'm going to stop supplying the government with, shit.
He's like, I'm going to press a button that deactivates all my weapons.
And he throws his, like, I'm going to assume it's a Nobel Peace Prize.
Or something.
Yeah. He throws it out the window and then Superman's like, I think you dropped this. Or I think it slipped out of your hand.
Yeah.
And he's like, Luthor's like, oh, fucking course you caught it, you son of a bitch. he's like, why are you even here? Get out of my fucking city. You don't own this city. It's mine. It doesn't belong to you. And he's like, you're right. It doesn't belong to me. And it doesn't belong to you either. And he says, you don't own us. And Lex is like, what do you mean us? You're not even from here. Why don't you go back to where you're from? And he says, because I can't. And even if I could, I wouldn't. This is my home, which is so awesome. Really, it really shows like the character that Superman is. And
Big fuck you to Lex.
Yeah, he says, "This is my home, and I'm not going to let you ruin it anymore." And then he flies away. And then we have this really nice little epilogue of, the Daily Planet's the #1 news outlet. Superman here to stay, all that kind of stuff. Clark Kent, asks Lois to lunch again. And she's like, "Get fucked." And she sees a note that says, "I'm on the roof," signed S. She runs up there, and by the time she's up there,
it's Clark Kent. I mean, Superman.
Yeah, by the time she's up there, Superman's already there.
And Clark, like, this is gonna be really like crass, but does Clark get off on cucking himself?
I don't know. I'll get back to you on that one.
Because Clark, when she's like, "Yeah, fuck off,"
he has a smile.
Yeah, he has a smile, and it's like,
yeah. No, I'll have to get back to you on that one because that would make a lot of sense. Yes. So she meets him up there, and he's she's like, "I never got a chance to thank you," and he's like, "Oh, that's funny. I wanted to thank you too." And she's like, "What? Why?" And he says, "For making me feel like I belong." And making the city see that as well.
They're getting ever so closer.
Yeah, they're getting closer. And, she's like, "Before you showed up, I didn't think it was possible for the world to be a good place." And she's like, "The world is messed up. But you've shown me that as long as we be the best versions of ourselves and prop each other up, the world will heal itself. And that the world will become a good place." And she even asks, like, "Is the world really that simple?" And he says, "I'd like to think so."
Yeah.
And then she says, "I never thought anyone like you could exist." And he says, "That's really funny." She's like, "What?" "I was going to say the same thing."
And they're about to kiss.
Yeah, they're about to kiss. And then Jimmy's like, "Hey, what's up, guys? I'm going to have my lunch up here." "Oh, was I interrupting something?"
And
it's really cute.
Yeah, and he's like, "Am I interrupting something?" And Superman's like, "No," and Lois is like, "Yes, I mean no."
Yeah, both at the same time. And then Lois was like, "Oh, so you were talking about the planet or whatever?" And Jimmy's like, "Oh, the Daily Planet?" And he's like, "Oh, with all the things that you've done for us, Superman, maybe we'll have enough money to get the planet spinning again, get all that rust off." And Superman's like, "I think I can help with that." And he turns it slightly and it starts spinning again.
Yeah.
And then as he's leaving, he's like, "Oh, you have a great rest of the day, Jimmy." Lois. And then she's like, "Wait a second." And she's like, "I have one last question." And she says, "Are you a man or an alien?" And he smiles and he says, "I'm Superman, Lois." And then he flies away. We then Jimmy says, like, "Man, Superman's pretty cool, right, Miss Lane?" And she says, "He is, Jimmy. He is pretty cool. I'm totally going to bone him."
She's like, "I want him bad.
Yeah.
I'm down bad
Yeah,
for Superman."
She is down bad for Superman. And then we cut to Lex Luthor. He goes out for the Luthor lottery, and no one's standing there. A new guy shows up to Metropolis, bumps into the lady from the beginning of the chapter 3, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. I wasn't looking where I was going. I was looking up to the sky." And she goes, "Oh, that's all right. Don't worry about that. We all look up to the sky. Sometimes we see him, sometimes we don't, but we always know that he's there."
Which is a great callback.
Yeah, great callback. And then it shows, someone pointing up saying, "Up in the sky." And it shows a kid wearing a Superman shirt, shows Lex looking out into the sky, shows Lois and Jimmy. Lois smiles as Superman passes. And then we end the story on this beautiful full page, just picture of Superman flying in Metropolis. Mm-hmm. It is beautiful. And that is the end of Superman's Secret Origins.
Yeah, that was a long one.
That was a long one. I think that this is, I might be close to our longest episode, if not the longest episode now.
Which I think it is fine.
There is a lot to cover in the story.
There was a lot. Also, I was very much letting you nerd out on things too, but I was also kind of pulling us on some side tangents. But
that's okay.
Like I said, I enjoyed this book. It doesn't speak to me personally, but I can very much see how someone can read this and become a Superman fan. Mm-hmm. It is a good book.
Yeah.
Despite my issues with the second chapter of it, I still think it's an enjoyable read. I still think someone, if you're new to comics, should pick this up and read it.
I 100% agree.
But again, I like there, as Ethan has said to me, if it isn't your tune, like it isn't your vibe, don't let anyone shit on you for not enjoying it.
Yeah. And I don't, in my personal opinion, I don't necessarily care if you didn't find this to be the greatest piece of work ever. Even if I view it as a phenomenal, I think it's top 10 best stories for me. As long as, as long as you can get something out of it, I think that it still did what it was supposed to do.
And again, I didn't feel like I wasted my time reading this.
You still enjoyed it.
I still enjoyed it. There was things I didn't like about it. It doesn't speak to me personally, but I enjoyed it. It was a good read. Am I going to pick up Superman comics in the future?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Hey, who knows? Maybe one day I will find the one Superman comic that just makes you go, damn, this is it. We'll find out. We'll find out if that ever happens.
I'm glad you're optimistic because I am not.
Hey, one day.
I mean, you might turn me around on Green Lantern.
I think you'll like Green Lantern a lot.
Because I have issues, like, again, Green Lantern's another hero that, like, doesn't necessarily, or it hasn't necessarily spoken to me in the past. But maybe now actually reading some things and you showing me some things, it might turn me around. I have more optimism for Green Lantern than I do for Superman.
Yeah. I definitely think you'll enjoy Green Lantern a lot when we finally cover, Hal Jordan. Because that's the Green Lantern I talk about a lot because that's my favorite Green Lantern. That's my favorite superhero. I love everything that he stands for. And he is very different from Superman. Because Superman, people will throw out the whole Boy Scout thing because he is a goody two-shoes. Hal Jordan is like a rebel. Like he's like he doesn't like following the rules. He does things the way he thinks is the right way to do it. And I think you might enjoy that about him, that he doesn't like authority.
He's kind of like a cowboy.
Yeah. Yes, he is like a cowboy. But we'll cover that in a future episode, not too far away, because I want to get some Green Lantern in at some point soon. I mean, I there's not much else I can really say about the story. I kind of said everything that needed to be said.
Yeah.
I definitely think that if you like Jeff Johns, or if you like Gary Frank, or if you are just interested in DC/Superman in general, you will not go wrong with picking up Superman Secret Origin. I also don't think there's anything wrong with reading Superman Birthright or Man of Steel by John Burns. Because those are both amazing origin stories. Now, they might both be a little bit dated by this point, because
not canon.
Technically not canon. And I will say this story feels timeless. They don't give you a date on when the story takes place. You just know it took place a while ago.
And I think also the art adds to that too.
Yeah, where it
that,
feels
like 60s kind of. Like I've said, like the way they depict like the city of tomorrow and like the future is very much like back in the 60s what they thought the future was going to be. Like the Jetsons,
the
things
Jetsons,
like that,
the Hanna-Barbera stuff.
Yeah,
I can see that. I really do think that this story should be read by a lot of people who are just interested in the character. I will say James Gunn, who is now in charge of the DC Cinematic Universe, because they're rebooting it.
Yeah.
He cited a few stories as inspiration for his Superman movie coming out next year. He cited All-Star Superman as one, which I know some people were really concerned about that because Superman dies in that book. Spoiler alert. And then the other one that he kind of referenced was this. He said that this was kind of like the big inspiration, which is good. This is the Superman you should have if you're going to start a cinematic universe.
I'm not a huge James Gunn fan. Like I liked Guardians when that came out, the first one. Second one was okay, and I have not seen the third one.
I have not either. I stopped watching Marvel stuff after Endgame.
Yeah, pretty much same. Yeah. I mean, I watched like Moon Knight.
Oh, I watched Spider-Man as well. The two Spider-Man movies.
Yeah. Like I've seen Moon Knight. I watched WandaVision, but after that, I had
just kind of fell off.
Yeah, just kind of haven't.
Yeah.
So like, I'm interested to see them do Superman in a less like gritty version, which I
Now,
think he needs.
I agree. Now, I will say James Gunn has already confirmed that Superman, this new Superman movie coming out, is not an origin story.
Okay.
This will be Superman who's already been Superman for at least a year or two. And the interesting part about that is there's a lot of other comic book characters in the movie. Because Metamorpho is in it. The guy that plays NoHo Hank and Barry is playing Metamorpho, who is like a classic DC hero. Guy Gardner is in it. Nathan Fillion is playing Guy Gardner, who is a Green Lantern.
Yeah.
He's the second human Green Lantern after Hal. There are some other characters. I think Fire and Ice are in it, and Fire and Ice are just old DC characters as well.
I wonder if he's trying to reboot this DC universe. Why? Like, I understand not doing an origin, but why would you throw in a bunch of heroes that
kind of detract from the character?
Right.
My idea, or the way that I'm thinking, is that they are not going to be playing significant roles. They're either going to be just side cameos of Superman doing something and he's like talking to another hero, like as the story, like to progress the plot.
Yeah.
Or they will show up in a post-credit scene.
Yeah.
Because a big thing that people don't necessarily realize with Superman in comic book history, because he is the leader of the Justice League. Everyone knows that.
Yeah.
When the Justice League was first formed, Superman was not on the team. He had nothing to do with the Justice League. And he did not join the Justice League until like I think the 70s or 80s. Yeah, he was not a part of the original
it's so iconic now.
Yeah, he's the leader. It's like him, Batman, Wonder Woman. Those are the three. Those are the three you have to have on the League.
I want to see more Wonder Woman.
Hey, guess what? We're going to cover Wonder Woman pretty soon. So,
like, I didn't mind the first Wonder Woman movie.
I didn't either.
I didn't see 84 or whatever.
It was really bad.
And as much crap as I've seen about the Suicide Squad game, what I've seen from Wonder Woman in that game, hands down the best part.
It's pretty accurate to how she is in comics.
I really liked her suit in that game.
I did too.
I thought it was really good.
I did too. I am partial to the classic suit.
Yeah.
From like pre-New 52. But yeah, no. We'll definitely cover Wonder Woman. Sadly, she's one of those characters that like doesn't, even though she's one of the three most iconic characters in all of comic books, because it's Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
DC could give less of a shit about her. Like they don't plan anything around her. They don't give her storylines that matter. She was the main character of Dark Knight's death metal, which makes no fucking sense because when they originally pitched death metal, Lex Luthor was the main villain, who was a Superman villain. And then because DC editorial was like, we like selling action figures, they were like, fuck Lex Luthor, make it the Batman Who Laughs.
Yeah.
Who is a Batman villain.
Oh, I know about them. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're telling me that you gave a whole event to Wonder Woman and it has nothing to do with Wonder Woman as a character.
Yeah.
She is essentially a footnote in it and she's the main character.
And
Superman and Batman are more important than Wonder Woman in her own event.
And I think the saddest thing about Wonder Woman, from my perspective, is that one of the most interesting storylines involving her is from Injustice, in the fact that it's
like a fucked up version of
it's the Atlanteans or whatever versus the Amazons. Or
that's Flashpoint.
Oh, is it Flashpoint?
That's Flashpoint.
Yeah. That's like, in my head, the biggest thing that like pops up as far as like a Wonder Woman.
And that's sad too, because both Flashpoint and Injustice make her an absolute monster.
Yeah.
Like she's like a fucked up individual.
Yeah.
When that's not who Wonder Woman is. She's actually like a decent human being.
Yeah. She's like, I wouldn't say a female version of Superman.
Except for the OMAC project where she totally snaps Maxwell Lord's head or neck or whatever.
Damn.
Yeah. But we'll cover that at a later time. I think that's essentially it. I don't think there's anything else. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
As per usual, go support local shops, the authors and
now
artists.
You might have to call around to get this because I don't believe this book is in print anymore. Specifically the hardcover, because I have the deluxe edition hardcover because of course it's Superman. You might be able to find the floppy trade around at certain shops, I would definitely call in. Definitely, like Mason said, support your local comic book store. If you can't get out to a store, you can read it digitally on DC Infinite, or if you want, you can purchase it on Amazon. I do believe they have the trade in stock at Amazon. But yeah, that's essentially it. So I think we're gonna head out.
Yep.
This has been Comics with Friends, the bi-weekly podcast where two best buds get together, read a comic, talk about what they like, what they maybe didn't like so much, and they talk about truth, justice, and the American way along the way. I have been your host, Ethan, joined by my co-host, Mason, and we are two best buds signing off. Bye-bye.
Bye.